The Soviet Union itself is no more.
The United States military has begun strikes.
Light them all up.
Считаю, что для современного мира однополярная модель не только неприемлема, но и вообще невозможна.
Народные республики Донбасса обратились к России с просьбой о помощи. Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
Russian military is taking chips from dishwashers and refrigerators to fix their military hardware. Russia's industry is in tatters.
Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been.
Greetings, everyone. No, you're muted. You're muted.
No, I'm muted. Typical for us, technical savants we are. And welcome back. We have a great show planned for you today.
We sure do.
And then followed by a lot of ranting from Chris and I. But first, we will allow Matt to speak, not listen to us kvetch for an hour. But our guest today is Matt Kennard. Now, I'm so excited to have him. You guys, if you follow my personal account on Twitter, if you've heard me in Spaces, I recommended this book. I can't even count, dozens of times at least. But he's here. He's the investigative journalist, former Financial Times, and co-founder of Declassified UK. His author of Irregular Army, about who the U.S. military recruited during the War on Terror and what happened when they came home. The original edition came out in 2012. The updated edition dropped recently in the United States and will be released soon in the UK, I believe. And it traces that story all the way to January 6th to MAGA and where we are right now. Matt, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Wonderful to have you.
Matt, for our viewers who I don't know why they wouldn't have read the 2012 edition yet after I've shoved it down their throats for so long, but could you just kind of give them the core thesis of Irregular Army and how the war on terror fundamentally changed the recruitment standards and the culture of the United States military?
Yeah, it really starts the day before 9/11, so September 10, 2001, and that's where the book starts, because Donald Rumsfeld gave this speech called Bureaucracy to Battlefield, and basically it was a vision to completely transform the Pentagon, and the program eventually became known as Transformation. And the idea was just to scale it down completely and privatize all its operations. And, this is something the Republicans and the corporate sector have been pushing for decades, and not just in the military, all parts of American society and institutions like Social Security. But anyway, he had this big plan. And then the following day, obviously, the terrorist attacks, awful tragedy, which completely spooked America. And he was pictured helping victims into ambulances outside the Pentagon, if people remember that as well. So his popularity was very high. So he had the perfect kind of petri dish to do this, and he had the population behind him. And this, what was known as the Rumsfeld kind of doctrine, was that you could invade countries using special forces, bribe local warlords, and then get out very quickly, and you didn't need a big army. And that basically the planning, and that kind of worked in Afghanistan initially. They took Kabul in a couple of months, bribing the Northern Alliance and pushed on through them. But obviously the occupation then didn't go to plan. But with Iraq, there was this big debate within the Pentagon, and it was called a war within a war, actually, which pitted like Eric Shinseki, who was chief of the army, against Rumsfeld, and also Colin Powell, who subscribed to the Powell doctrine, which was the opposite of the Rumsfeld doctrine, which was that you needed an overwhelming force and a big occupying army. Anyway, there was this big debate, and Rumsfeld won essentially, and they invaded. The US invaded Iraq with I think under 200,000 troops, which was kind of half what CENTCOM had actually recommended. And obviously the occupation didn't go to plan, and then to put it lightly, so the Pentagon was in no way prepared. Now, part of that was patched up by the use of private military and security companies. Like there was at the time big issue. But Jeremy Scahill wrote that book Blackwater, which became a bestseller, and everyone was talking about the privatization of the war effort. But they still needed a big army, and they couldn't recruit or retain enough soldiers because they weren't prepared. So recruitment was they weren't reaching recruitment targets. They didn't want to institute conscription, which would have been the answer, right? And was what was done during Vietnam. But the Bush administration knew how unpopular the war in Iraq was and didn't want to institute conscription because they thought that a Vietnam scenario would take place, which would be that it would increase opposition to the war, and then it would force withdrawal, as it did in Vietnam. So if you don't institute conscription, and you can't recruit or retain enough soldiers, what do you do? Now they did do things like stop loss, where they deploy troops for many more tours than they previously would have done, smaller gaps between the tours, but none of it really worked. So what they then did was to completely transform the regulatory structure of the Pentagon. And I think from the research I did for the book, I think it's one of the most profound, maybe the most profound transformation of the US military in its history, because everything was thrown out the window. So some of it was public, like they publicly raised the enlistment age from 35 to 42. They changed rules on body weight publicly to try and incentivize overweight people to join up. but what the book focuses on, or the main part of the book focuses on, is what they did secretly, or they wanted to keep quiet, which was the completely jettisoning the regulations on neo-Nazis, white supremacists, gang members, criminals, stopping kicking out soldiers guilty of consuming alcohol, drugs, also redeploying, not treating people with PTSD or using drugs to treat them rather than actually anything that would have actually solved the problem. So, and I mean, it's interesting because in America, you can kind of call up neo-Nazi groups, which you can't do in the UK. So when I was initially researching this, it was actually, the story was interesting in that I didn't know it. I didn't see some evidence and was like, I want to do this story. I actually was just like thinking this must be the case. So why don't I check it out? When I knew that they were getting rid of all these regulations publicly, I was like, well, I bet they're doing the same thing privately. So I rang up the neo-Nazi groups in the States and was like, look, I'm a journalist. I just wondered, can you just talk to me a bit about what's going on in Iraq and your members? Are they serving? All of them straight away were like, yeah, we've never had it this good in the US military. We can sign up with swastikas. We've got members out there who are telling us they're serving openly with their ideological predilections public. So it went from there really, and then I went down to Tampa and interviewed a neo-Nazi veteran who was in the Hammer, who I don't know if he's still in, but was in the Hammerskins, which is like the most violent skinhead group in the US, and he served out in Iraq in 2004 and 5 and spent a couple of days with him. Actually went to the zoo with his kids, which was quite bizarre, but I
remember that part in the book.
Yeah, and it was very strange, but he basically reinforced all this. So he gave the sort of nuts and bolts of what it was like out there, and he was talking to. I actually called up one of the commanders he referenced to find out if the story was true, and the commander basically vouched for what he was saying, and he was saying basically, he said the commanders liked the fact I was a Nazi because I'd take on the hardest missions and they thought I was a proper warrior. And there were occasions where he'd go off for a break from the military and they knew he was going to perform with his neo-Nazi band, which was called Attack in Germany, and come back to Iraq straight from there. So it was crazy. And then I looked at the gangs was also, maybe in terms of numbers, is definitely a bigger issue because there were analysts at the time who were saying, and it might still be the case, that 10% of the US military. Now I can't vouch for that number, but like not fringe person told me that, an analyst because that again, they weren't kicked out at all, and like neo-Nazis, they have a reason for wanting to join the US military. In the case of the neo-Nazis and white supremacists, they believed in this thing called RAHOA, which is racial holy war, where they would get training courtesy of the US taxpayer, bring that back to the US, and then start this racial holy war, which would be a civil war, which would ignite and set all the races in America against each other and end up with a white supremacist regime in Washington. Like, thousands of them served, and thousands of them are now back in the US. So it should be a worry for every American. But in the case of the gangs, it's the same thing. You know, these are street gangs and drug trafficking gangs that are involved in violence all the time, and the organizations see the US military as a good way to get training. And interestingly, it became very interlinked with the drug war in Mexico as well, because some of these bases like Fort Bliss are on the border. And the gangs see soldiers as very good kind of personnel to be involved, because you have a certain degree of safety on a US military base. That law enforcement isn't as stringent on a base. So you saw that huge amounts of the US military, or parts of it, these soldiers that were members of gangs were facilitating the drug trafficking as well. And then criminals, which was again, you know, you guys probably were aware of this, but not many people were, that they started giving out moral waivers. So there was previously a regulations on the fact that if you were a felon or you were guilty of serious misdemeanors, you would be barred. And then they just threw that out completely and started giving out moral waivers at a huge level. And that had a huge impact on the population in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's one case which I talked about in the book, which is the Mahmoudiya massacre in 2006, when a group of American soldiers went to this house just south of Baghdad, separated the 14-year-old girl from her family, the father and her sisters, killed them, and then went into the other room. All those American soldiers raped this 14-year-old girl and then killed her and burnt down the house, and then told the US military it was the work of insurgents. The US military accepted that, as they always did. You know, they like to, the only way a US military ever admits some of its own personnel have committed a massacre is when they're pushed after deny, they have to. Anyway, in this case, a soldier had a crisis of conscience from within the unit and said what happened. But the leader of that, Stephen D. Green, got into the US military on a moral waiver. So you see, I mean, and in the book I do this, I try and link some of the atrocities that we know about in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is a small fraction of what actually happened, but you can try and link them to what happens to the regulations, because those regulations are in place for a reason, you know, partly to protect the American population, but also to protect the people at the other end of the guns, because you don't need too much of an imagination to know what people who see brown people, Muslims, Jews as subhuman, and you're handing them a M16 or an M4 and putting them out in a country full of them in a war which actually was racist in the sense. And when I say that, I'm quoting some of the soldiers that I interviewed, because I interviewed some American soldiers who would talk about how the culture was so racist of even the commanders. They would all call the Iraqis Hajis, and that was just the rigor.
Or worse.
Or worse, yeah.
Or worse, yeah. Sand, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, we'll get to that. Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
but so yeah, exactly. So the culture is that you've got all these extremists that already have a hatred towards brown people, Muslims, Jews, whatever it is, anyone who's not white, effectively, and also have complete impunity. So as I said, the small amount of massacres that we know about only came about because the US military were forced to admit it after denying it for ages, but so many of them didn't. So you had that impunity, and so that's a toxic mix. So we'll never know the scale of devastation that this policy caused, but you can guess. And then, and now we're seeing it play out in the United States. You know, like I still do look at local news reports sometimes about that involve veterans, and they're very, very frequent. You know, like not crimes that would make it to the New York Times, but like small murders, or not small, but you know, like low number murders, or serious organized crime. Often these local news reports will say, and this person served, when they're talking about the court documents, they'll say this person served in Iraq or Afghanistan, and it's a pattern. And we're waiting for something to happen. That's what I believe. It's like Timothy McVeigh in 1995 when he blew up the government building in Oklahoma City. He served in the first Gulf War. So that was a 5-year incubation period. Like in the preface to the book, I chart all the cases that have been happening regularly. And luckily, so far, the big, large-scale attacks have been thwarted by the FBI. But all it takes is one of them to get through, and you're talking about mass casualty of events. And it's a story which I don't understand why it isn't more of a issue in America, because like it is really, really worrying what these people are up to, and they have no loyalty to the Constitution or to that. They don't see America as legitimate, this government, and they want to overthrow it, and they want to institute a white supremacist regime. So one of the guys I spoke to, Dennis Mahon, in the book, who is now in prison for an attempted terrorist attack. He was talked about as actually, you know, there was apparently a second person with Timothy McVeigh. So often people said it was him. And when I interviewed him, I said, "Was it you?" And he was like, "Well, I don't think it was me. Maybe it was, but I don't remember." It was very strange, but there's a lot of people like that, and they're called lone wolves. You know, that the other thing is, like, outside of the lone wolves who are kind of operate below the radar, and people don't often know their names, but they've often served in the US military. So it's a really toxic mix that we're going to see play out in the future.
Oh, well, you mentioned the disregard for the Constitution. I do want to, because I know Chris is frothing at the mouth to ask. I saw him jump. So I just want to reiterate, guys, make sure you get the newest edition. It contains the connection to January 6th. So I want to give you a chance to tell us why you decided to update it. Now, I think it's incredibly appropriate timing, but why you decided to update the edition 14 years later, and if you can give us any insight on the connections, how you draw the line from the recruitment policies to January 6th.
Yeah, well, I did a supplementary piece that went in a version in 2015, and that was kind of like the war coming home. So it was a focus on more and what was happening in the US, and then recently, I partly it was Trump. I mean, or mainly it was Trump, to be honest with you, because it seemed like, especially with Pete Hegseth, it seemed like what had been trying to reveal and what the US military had been trying to hide was basically just out in the open now and institutionalized, which is hugely worrying, especially when it came out all about his tattoos. You know, these are when I was doing investigations and talking to investigators and within the US military and stuff, they'd send me pictures of tattoos where they say this guy's serving and nothing's happening. And then you had Pete Hegseth, who's got like kafir written on his arm, which is like Arabic for infidel, and basically is a site him showing that he sees a civilizational threat from Islam and sees them as the enemy. He's got like a Jerusalem cross, which is neo-Crusader imagery. So, and this is the most powerful guy in the Pentagon. He runs the whole show. So I felt like it was a hugely scary development and a kind of institutionalization of it. I also felt like no one was making the connection between the advent of Donald Trump and the war on terror. You know, like bipartisan Washington or the Democrats and so-called moderate Republicans always present Donald Trump as this outlier who's completely come in and subverted the system. And there's an element of truth to that, but many of the conditions that were put in place during the war on terror and many of the legislative changes have allowed someone like Donald Trump to come in. I mean, it's, for an example is Dick Cheney's imperial presidency, or what was called the imperial presidency in the Bush administration, which was that huge amounts of power was concentrated in the executive branch. And now you see Donald Trump invading Venezuela, Iran, and there's no one even talks about the legislative branch. It's bare, like from afar over the Atlantic. I sometimes forget you even have a legislative branch because it's all just there's a huge concentration of power that comes from the war on terror, plus all the Patriot Act, the warrantless surveillance, the securitization of all kind of governance, the militarization of police. So much of this comes that he's now taking advantage of. And also in a historical context, because I really worry about not just America, but the whole world in terms of the rise of fascism. I think it's like a serious, serious threat to all of us. And obviously we have evidence of what when it first began and when it moved from Italy to Germany and the tragedy that engendered, and then I started looking at if you look at Mussolini and so much of his movement was drawn from veterans of the First World War. So there was even though Italy was on the winning side, they made no kind of territorial gains or no discernible gains. And many of the troops were disillusioned. They weren't treated well. They weren't respected by the society that they came home to and that they fought for. And he took advantage of that. And many their violence was directed against the left. They'd go and smash up left-wing newspapers or union offices and stuff like that. And it seemed there was many parallels with what had happened in the United States. That there's 2 million veterans of the war on terror, and they're not. There's many of them are disillusioned because it's seen as a failure, right? They've sacrificed all this, and it was a complete failure. In Afghanistan, they occupied it for 20 years, and then the day after they left, the Taliban took over again. Iraq, it was a disaster, and it's still actually, if you look at it, disastrous in many ways. And then they're suffering with PTSD, which is untreated. And there's it was a bipartisan disaster. It was Democrats and Republicans. So it gave the space for someone like Donald Trump, a demagogue like Donald Trump, in the Mussolini mold, and make America great is straight Mussolini talk. To say, look, and actually, if you look at his pitch to get elected, although it was rubbish, he was basically arguing against the war on terror philosophy. He was like, we're not going to do nation building, we're not going to do go abroad on all these foreign useless foreign adventures. We're going to make America. It's America first. So he tapped into that whole anxiety, that whole disillusioned veteran community, and also the wider society, which was affected by the same sort of things. So I felt like it was, and no one talks about this, mainly because it's not in the interests of official Washington, the Democrats or the Republicans, because it implicates them. But so much of what we're seeing, but I think if we're going to actually try and tackle someone like Trump and tackle the movement that he's kind of sparked around the world, you've got to understand it better. And although, of course, it's not the whole explanation is not the war on terror, the whole explanation is not what happened to the US military, but it's a major part of it that should be talked about. And also, just specifically to the thesis of Irregular Army, with these allowing these extremists in, these gangs, these criminals, it has a big effect on American society outside of the institution itself, because you can't, firstly, it's millions of people we're talking about. Secondly, in many ways, the US military is the most important institution in American society. Half the congressional budget goes on the Pentagon. According to some estimates, 1.5 trillion a year. I know officially it's 1 trillion or just under 1 trillion, but you know, a ridiculous amount of money. So when you completely eviscerate the standards, when you destroy any kind of regulations against extremists, criminals, gang members, it's going to have a major impact on the wider society. It's going to filter out, it's going to percolate out. You can't hold it within. So I also feel like in terms of American decline and that kind of thing, it's an important topic that we should be talking about from a sociological point of view. And then finally, I was looking at the epilogue really looks at like the fall of Rome, because I found this quite interesting, because I didn't know much about the Roman Empire and the fall of the Roman Empire. But obviously this was like, it's been argued about by historians for 1,000 years or more. And there's so many different theses around why did Rome, which was like controlled a third of the population of the world or a third of the land, why did it fall so quickly? And I found this guy called Vegetius, who was a military thinker, and he wrote this book called Concerning Military Matters, I think in the 4th century. And basically his argument was like, we are declining, we're failing because we are dropping standards in our military. And his book is still seen as like, in fact, apparently it was read by Pentagon planners, but his argument was that the empire that he loved was gonna fall if they didn't stop allowing what was called barbarization. Then they were allowing barbarians who had previously not been allowed to serve, who didn't know about Roman standards, they didn't have the same Roman standards. So I sort of thought, well, this is quite similar to what I'm writing about. There's a barbarization of the US military, and he was writing about mercenaries as well. And then the other, I mean, in a literal way as well, because one of the chapters in the book is about how another way they kind of tried to patch up the fact that the lack of troops was to allow to start what they call green card soldiers, which was they would massively up the number of troops that they basically promised them green cards and then citizenship if they served. And in fact, interestingly, and the first soldier to die in Iraq, American soldier, was not actually American, he was Guatemalan. Oh, yeah. And he had actually fled Guatemala, and his parents had been caught up in the brutal Guatemalan civil war and genocide, actually, where over 200,000 indigenous Mayans were killed. And that was a civil war started effectively by the United States and sustained by the United States. You know, it was a democracy in 1954, and then the CIA overthrew it because Jacob Arbenz, the president, wanted to redistribute a little bit of land to peasants. But his family had fled from the countryside, where it was literally Nazi-style horrors were happening in the countryside, and they fled. And then he was a street kid. And he didn't have anything, and then he went to America, and there's letters that I quote in the book where he's messaging his sister, writing to his sister saying, "Look, I really don't want to join the military, but I don't have any option." And that was how it. And then he went, and in March 2003 he was killed in Qasr in South Iraq, friendly fire, first soldier. But it's just so there was loads of those as well. There's loads of green card soldiers, and there was also loads of recruiters actually going to Mexico. And this was something I couldn't believe when I was. But there were U.S. military recruiters going to Mexico, and it was exposed in the Mexican press at the time. But it was really desperation. They were trying everything, and actually, interestingly, how non-ideological it was is shown by the fact that another group which benefited massively from this kind of free-for-all was homosexual service members, because there's a chapter in the book about how all the homosexual service members that I was talking to, veterans and active duty, were saying to me, "Look, we've never had it this good. Like, don't ask, don't tell isn't applied. We can talk about being openly gay." And that wasn't because the Bush administration wanted to do it, but they just could not afford to kick out gay people anymore. So it didn't discriminate in that sense. It was just a laissez-faire because they couldn't get enough troops. But obviously I agree with gay people being able to serve, but I don't agree with neo-Nazis being able to serve.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to get his reaction to this clip, since his book is about January 6th. Yeah. And,
sorry, I didn't mention January 6th. Yeah.
Yes, and Trump has been talking about January 6th again lately. So I wanted to get your opinion on this.
The Justice Department has this new fund that was announced today, $1.7 billion. Yeah. Why should taxpayers pay for the January 6th?
Well, it's been very well received, I have to tell you. I know very little about it. I wasn't involved in the whole creation of it and the negotiation. But this is reimbursing people that were horribly treated. It's anti-weaponization. They've been weaponized. They've been, in some cases, imprisoned wrongly. They paid legal fees that they didn't have. They've gone bankrupt. Their lives have been destroyed. And they turn out to be right. I mean, it was a terrible period of time in the history of our country. And they worked on it. I know the Justice Department, it's really been working on it very hard. There's been numerous other occasions over the years where things like this have been done, but these were people that were weaponized and really treated brutally by a system that was so corrupt, with corrupt people running it, and they're getting reimbursed for their legal fees and the other things that they had to suffer. Yeah, please.
I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. It's interesting that he says these people were weaponized. Yeah, they were by you. So it's more like a buy off for loyalty, I would think.
Yeah, well, this is what when he said that, that's exactly what I thought as well. Yeah, they were weaponized. But it's interesting because obviously this follows on from him pardoning them all, right? So it's a message to say, look, you can do it again. And this is what I don't see this guy leaving when his term ends. Or I mean, he didn't do a peaceful handover of power last time, but I just can't see it happening. And so he's probably putting it in place. Well, he's definitely putting in the kind of mood music to allow something like that to happen again. Because if you say not only that you're pardoning, but you're going to be financially reimbursed, if he calls on them again, they could do the same thing again. And then it is linked to the thesis of the book, because if you look at there was quite a lot of analysis of the demographics of the people that were involved in January 6th, and I think 14% were veterans or active duty, and actually 20%, according to what I think NPR said, it was 20%, and they're obviously 7% of the population, so it's massively disproportionate, and that's not surprising, really. Within the US government, there is awareness that there is a real threat here. And in fact, if you look at US government reports, official ones from the Department of Homeland Security, they say that actually the biggest terrorist threat, is actually white supremacist neo-Nazi. Every time someone's kind of gone out on a whim to try and raise the alarm, they've been persecuted. So there was, in the book I quote at length, a guy called Daryl Johnson, who I'm not sure if you're aware of. I don't know if he's that well known, but yeah, you do know him. He was at the DHS, and he authored this report, I think in 2009, basically, where it was quite tame. It wasn't anything extreme, but he basically said, look, there's a real problem here because the veteran community is more susceptible to being recruited by these groups than the general population. Plus, these groups are active in the US military and looking to recruit veterans in active duty. What happened to him? He was put out to pasture, widely attacked. They said he was unpatriotic. He hated the troops, all the usual stuff. And he lost his job. And you see that again and again and again. So, so the impunity that Trump has, the pardoning of the January 6th, the fact he's now going to financially reimburse them. And did they say 1.7 billion?
Yes, 1.7
yeah, so
billion.
That's not just going to pay for legal fees. That's like a handout, basically. So it's also he's really is like sending a signal that this is fine. You can attack the Capitol. You can, and they've done this in the U.S. military, by the way. Again, to go back to what I was saying about why I was so shocked by Hegseth. And continue to be, is that he says openly. So he, in his confirmation hearing in the US, when he was made Secretary of Defense, now Secretary of War, he said we will no longer concentrate on extremism because this is a witch hunt. So that is a signal to neo-Nazi groups, white supremacist groups, say, look, you can join now. Now, as I say, obviously, it's been the case that they have been able to, but it was never some kind of explicit. It was never official policy, but Hegseth made it official policy. Then he also said, look, the rules, we don't deal with these stupid rules of engagement. That's a verbatim quote. So that's also just a signal to say you can commit war crimes, and that is totally supported by the Pentagon. So that is unprecedented. That is unprecedented. I mean, it's not unprecedented that it's happened, but it's unprecedented that it's official policy. And it is a very, very scary thing because we've seen the results already. They've just gone in, they attacked and kidnapped the president of Venezuela in January. They attacked Iran, but on the first day, they bombed that girls' school, killed 170 schoolgirls. Now, they say that, well, they denied that they had anything to do with it. Then they said it was probably a mistake. But, it might not have been a mistake. Like, these people are crazy and they want to send a signal like, we're not messing around. You have to do exactly what you're told. It's fascism. It's saying, look, if you don't do what you're told, we'll take you out and kill you. And actually, in the case of Venezuela, apparently it was the same. After Maduro was kidnapped, Delcy Rodriguez, who took over, apparently got a phone call where they said, look, if you don't do what you're told, we're going to come and do the same thing to you, but worse, which is a threat of assassination. So, yeah, it's hard to think of how more extreme it can go. But and we're not talking about a power that is small. This is the most powerful military in human history. It's the most powerful country in human history. So, anything when you're talking about this kind of change at the top, it should worry every human on the planet because we don't know where it's going to end, but we're seeing evidence of it. I don't know. I actually don't know how we fight back against it, but because I mean, from the UK side, we've got 12,000 US soldiers here and 13 US bases that are barely known about. They've been known about a bit more now because they were used to attack Iran and it became a political debate in the mainstream. But literally, I was doing work on this 3 or 4 years ago and I was shocked that nothing I was turning up, nearly all of it was open source, had ever been published in the UK paper. Even that figure of how many US troops were just in the UK has never been published in the UK newspaper, including The Guardian. So you're thinking, how is it that, look, even if you agree with it, it's just quite interesting if you're occupied by, or there's a foreign military presence of that number. But it's not interested. It's just assumed that we are the property of the United States, and it's the same with the rest of Europe. But so from my side, in terms of fighting back against it, I see, and the US military and its lawlessness around the world, I see trying to ignite a campaign here to get the US troops kicked out, which is actually quite strong now. And the leader of the Green Party, Zach Polanski, has actually called, or he said that I think he said if they attack Iran that they should leave, but it's not as explicit as it should be. But his policy is basically we should kick the US troops out. And Charles de Gaulle did this in 1966, by the way. So there is a precedent for it, and they've never gone back, the US troops. It's the only kind of Western European country that's done it, but it really is building in Europe. And this is the kind of contradiction of Trump, because he's so wild and criminal and overtly criminal, but he's also just a awful strategist. The reason that the US empire hasn't done this before is because it's not in their own interests. He's shooting himself in the foot a lot of the time, even like with defunding US aid and the NED. Like he thinks that they are charitable institutions that are about spreading freedom and democracy and giving aid to poor people, but in fact obviously they're part of the tapestry of the US empire, but he's got rid of them. So I don't know how it will end, but or how we fight it. I mean, I'd like to hear what you guys think, but it's the situation is very, very serious. I don't think many people really understand the seriousness of it. Obviously they understand it in the global south because they're the victims, but I mean in the West.
Yeah. One thing for sure, I mean, both Sarah and I are served in the U.S. military. I served in the army, and I was in the infantry and trained went to airborne school and all that. And while I was in Fort Benning in 2009, which was at the height of this sort of, we had the surge, we had the start of the Iraq War, then the surge and the buildup. I remember vividly in my training unit, tons of people with like Totenkopf tattoos and 88s.
Really?
Oh my God, yeah. It was apparent. And of course, I'm Iranian American, so I was called a sand N-word all the time. It was
wow, that's interesting.
They would see my name, they would see my nameplate, and they would say, "What are you, effing Muslim and this and that?" And yeah, it was pretty brutal. And of course, I left the military. I didn't agree with the military's policies, and I had a really tough time there. But of course, I finally left. Especially when they started to threaten my life. They said, people come back in body bags, but it's not always from enemy fire.
Wow.
So I was like, I think that's my cue.
Yeah. Bloody hell, that's crazy.
It is crazy. And one of the things, and of course that was in the deep South. So Georgia, Alabama, But one thing that I started to realize while I was there, because I'm a student of American history as well, is that this is not a new phenomenon. Of course, your book traces it from the war on terror and sort of like 9/10, 9/11. But there's another book, Bring the War Home, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah.
So also going back to the Vietnam War and looking at the White Power movement. But even before that, I look at the Cold War period and how the U.S. government utilized neo-Nazi and fascist groups in Italy, in Eastern Europe. They basically gave safe harbor to a lot of those collaborators in Greece.
Gladio.
My mom's Operation Gladio. My mom's native Greece. They empowered before even the end of World War II. They empowered the monarcho-fascists to go after the communists. And my great uncle executed and all this stuff. So for me, it has always been a very useful tool to the ruling class to use these groups. And they've always been right now you have Azov, you have Pravy Sector, you have all these groups that are operating, all these neo-phalangists. They were in Iraq, they were fighting alongside the Kurds. I made a big report about this because I was in Syria in 2017, and there were a bunch of neo-Nazis who were there who said, absolutely, we're fighting with the Aryans against the Arabs. Alongside. It was crazy stuff. I wanted to get your perspective as to how pervasive is this amongst sort of the NATO coalition, and not only strictly in the US, but if you were to broaden it to the US and across the sort of like Euro-Atlantic alliance, how common is this? Because in the UK you're dealing with Tommy Robinson, you're dealing with Unite the Right, you're dealing with over there, you're dealing with a whole bunch of homegrown, English defense thing had in the 30s. What was it? The tram car. What was it? That fight that happened in the UK. Big fight between anti-fascists and fascists.
What, recently?
No, way back in like
Cable Street.
Cable Street, that's it. Cable Street. Yeah. So you also have a history of the
of course.
Right? So what do you make of that? How do you see this in the broader sort of imperial and sort of European and American context?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's always they've used fascist elements for the only period I've looked since Second World War, but actually, you know what? Before he invaded Poland, many elements within the establishment here, I don't know if it's the case in the United States, but here supported Hitler as well, and the corporate sector and the British establishment. And then obviously in the Spanish Civil War, Texaco supported Franco, the corporate sector, and there was no arms given to. So that's because basically the war. There's a book called The Jakarta Method, which I'm sure you know by Evans, which the war is against communism, socialism, right? So who are the main people who are going to do that for you? It's going to be fascistic far right elements. So it's not a coincidence that they've used them over and over again. And I mean, in the case, in Britain, the situation is really, really serious because, like you said, like the next prime minister is going to be Nigel Farage, who is maybe not a fascist, but he's close to that. And there's definitely fascist elements of his Reform Party. To the right of him is Tommy Robinson, who is he's just a street fascist. You know, he said he wants to stop Islam over the weekend. I don't know how he proposes to do that, but he is just igniting hatred against Muslims. I mean, it's so crazy the situation we have here. Just to like give you an example, there was this rally this weekend, which was a Tommy Robinson rally called Unite the Kingdom. And it actually took place on the same day as Nakba Day protests, pro-Palestinian protests. Not coincidentally, actually, they did it to create a scene. But one of the guys on the stage who was playing the guitar or some instrument, I can't remember what instrument it was, but he like got bacon out of a packet and put it over his shoulders. And like all the crowd were cheering, and he was playing this instrument, just like an anti-Muslim statement to say, like, I mean, imagine that if it was about Jewish people. The Nazis, sometimes the stuff you can say about Muslims is definitely to the point of what the Nazis would say about Jews, but maybe even further. You know, I haven't looked into too much. But similar to Der Stürmer, what you could say about Jewish people in Der Stürmer, you can say in the Daily Mail about Muslim people. So it's super, super serious. Plus, these people aren't going to solve any of the problems. Nigel Farage isn't going to come in and solve any of the problems that afflict British society. They talk about the small boats. This is the major issue, which American viewers might not know about, but it's like these boats that come from France with refugees. And it's a major issue. And he said he's going to stop the small boats. Now, that's going to have no impact on people's lives at all. No one will notice. The big problem is the power of the corporations over our government, the power of the establishment to hold on to its resources and power, the problem of the corporate media and the establishment media, which propagandizes everyone. None of that, they're not going to touch any of that, because the other part of what you're saying is about the history of the Western alliance using fascists, but also the establishment in the West has domestically used fascists to kind of clamp down on any kind of rising up of the left, and they always choose fascists if it's a choice between fascists and socialists, and that includes the liberal class, by the way, as well, because the fascists leave them alone effectively, or allow their entrenched power to stay, and you saw that with Mussolini. So Farage is going to come in, not going to solve anything, and then the only place you can go after that is Tommy Robinson, who's more extreme. So I know it sounds to me preposterous to say someone like Tommy Robinson could ever be in power, but things are changing. You know, we've never, since the Second World War, we've never had a non-Tory or Labour government, and it's pretty much certain we're going to have our first non-Tory Labour government. So the whole picture is changing, and the left is nowhere. You know, we are literally nowhere. So to go to your point, they've used it abroad. They've used them abroad. They've used them domestically. And actually, you mentioned Ukraine. I did quite a lot of work on the Ukraine stuff, and it was madness. You know, the Azov, like the founder of Azov is on record as saying like he wants to lead the white races against the Untermenschen, and I mean he was and we were and then a couple of years ago Boris Johnson invited them into Parliament and held up the flag. I tweeted it and it went around, but that never got published in a newspaper. So how can you have? It's just a bizarre. It's a bizarre position where they will constantly talk about anti-Semitism and the problem of it, but only when it involves the left, because that is basically weaponized as a tool to protect Israel. When the real neo-Nazis, because they're useful to the state in its foreign policy objectives, they don't care at all. In fact, they'll support them. And in the case of Argentina, in the US case, when their dictatorship came in 1976, which went on to 83, that was actually had Nazi personnel in it. Actual not even neo-Nazi, because a lot of the Nazis went to Argentina after the Second World War, and that was that junta was particularly vicious in the whole of South America. That was 30,000 people, maybe more, were killed, and the major backer of that junta was the US and Henry Kissinger. And that junta killed a disproportionate amount of Jewish people, actually, because Nazi influence, but also because they were seen as dissidents, social workers, teachers, blah blah blah, and it was horrendous. But it was backed by the US because they didn't want any kind of left regime or left government to get in Argentina, and actually this started straight after the Second World War. In fact, that's what the Truman Doctrine was about. The Truman Doctrine was about empowering all the elements that collaborate with the Nazis against the elements that had fought the Nazis explicitly. It involved Greece because the British invaded Greece in 1944 when the Nazis retreated, and they presented as a liberation mission. It was called Operation Manna. And actually what it was about was that with the Nazis retreating, they didn't want the communists and the socialists that had been fighting the Nazis under occupation to take power. So, and then the Greek Civil War happened, where the British and then handed it on to the Americans, but they supported the collaborators with the Nazis and then instituted effectively a fascist regime there. So, and then it continued on and on and on all over the world. So, yeah, but this is like, the funny thing is, like, this is the truth. But then when it goes through the sausage factory of the propaganda system, well, it's presented as we support freedom and democracy, and we're on the side of the kind of liberal democracy, which is so prevalent. Like, it's so hard to get these truths out. In fact, you can't talk about them in the mainstream media. So I think that's the major problem we have, is there's just so much confusion about everything, and there's so much confusion about, and particularly the other elephant in the room, which is relevant to the rise of the far right, is Israel. Like, if you, I was in Brazil a couple of years ago, about 18 months ago, and I went to a Bolsonaro rally, and one of the shocking things was that there were more Israel flags than Brazilian flags. Like, they obsessed with Israel. And you see Tommy Robinson's the same. He's a massive. We went to Israel a couple of months ago. The Israel lobby around the world and the Israeli state very, very consciously supports the far right because and promotes the ideology which underpins it, which is that Islam is a civilizational threat, Muslims are backward. And if you listen to Netanyahu, he says this all the time. He said, we're on the front line. They're going for us now, but they'll go for you next. So the whole way that one of the main ways that the Israeli state and its lobby around the world kind of gets the Western countries on board is to demonize Muslims and to stoke up Islamophobia. And it's very, very obvious here. Those Tommy Robinson rallies, there's always loads of Israel flags. It's not a coincidence, though. It's not like, also they see Israel as like kind of the lodestar, because it's like a white supremacist regime which is massacring indigenous people who happen to be Muslim as well, which is even better for them. So obviously they love it, and so but it's if you look at like Milei in Argentina, the kind of far right libertarian president now, he's obsessed with Israel. Obsessed. He like and so you see it again and again. In Bolivia, actually, one of the interesting things I was looking recently, because there's been this big uprising in Bolivia.
Oh yeah, looks like a revolution might be occurring at this point.
And Bolivia is an amazing country. I've been a bunch of times and did a lot of reporting on the US subversion of the Evo Morales government. But one of the interesting things was that when there was a coup in 2019, where he was overthrown, which was eventually reversed the following year. But after that, it was reported in the press that the coup regime, which was kind of fascist elements, or actually pretty much a fascist government.
They were fascist.
They were. They the first people they tapped up to help them in their campaign to massacre indigenous dissidents that were rising up against the coup regime was Israel. And that came in the Times of Israel. So like they're seen as and the British used to be like that. So we were known as the best at counterinsurgency because we'd put down so many liberation movements and popular movements. We kind of did it all over the world, and we honed our skills in Ireland, subjugating Ireland for 500 years. So we were called up, and if you look, like there was the uprising in Sri Lanka, the MI6 and the SAS were sent there. So, and Israel is now that kind of, for fascist regimes that want to massacre indigenous people, for fascist regimes that want to liquidate democracy, Israel's the person you go to, and they'll do whatever is in their interests and whatever they think is in their interest for survival. The front line for Israel is obviously West Asia, but they definitely see the globe as their chessboard is the whole globe, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, you mentioned Ukraine and the militias there. Our chat is going nuts, which I'm glad, because I had a question written about it anyway, about Charlottesville, Atomwaffen, Azov connections. And we recently had a shooting at, I wouldn't say it was an Islamic center, maybe it was a mosque, but it was in San Diego, by children, 17 and 18-year-olds, who in their 75-page manifesto, sheesh, touch grass maybe, but in their 75-page manifesto, they thank Azov, and they're wearing Atomwaffen patches. Do you know anything about the Charlottesville, Atomwaffen, Azov, and do you have any thoughts on the recent attack in San Diego?
No, I can't say anything specific to that, but there's definitely links between the neo-Nazi groups and the Ukrainian militias, and I saw that in my reporting, but also I saw that in my reporting on UK support for the Ukrainian military as well. Again, to go to your point of like state complicity, they were training them. There was evidence. We found evidence that a neo-Nazi Ukrainian soldier had trained at Sandhurst in the UK. Now, for people who, most people won't know what that is, but that's one of the most senior.
It's like West Point.
Yeah, exactly. It's where like the royal families
exactly.
And so there was a Ukrainian neo-Nazi that was trained there. So it's but you're gonna they link up because there is a fascist international now. That's the thing. So they see themselves as all linked.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's no counterpoint on the left at all. So I don't really know how the hell we fight back, but I don't know. But it's also been happening in the UK. I can probably talk more interestingly on that. Like there was an attack the other day that was on a mosque. We don't quite know what it was about anymore, but a lot of there's also been attacks on Jewish people in Golders Green, but these are always presented as like Iranian-backed terrorist attacks with zero evidence, and there's never anything to back it up. And also, not those attacks, to be honest, but a lot of kind of the more low-level attacks. I do wonder how many are kind of false flags done by the Israeli groups. I mean, I wouldn't like to say because we don't have the evidence, but that's the nature of these things. You never get the evidence because they're false flags. But you see again and again and again how they use anti-Semitic attacks or false flag anti-Semitic attacks when Israel is under pressure globally. Interesting one was Mamdani. I don't even know what happened with this, but soon after, or maybe the night he was elected or something, that someone put up loads of swastikas on a Jewish center in New York. And I don't know, maybe that was a neo-Nazi that felt, but it just felt like too perfect that it was on the night of Mamdani. But we got to be very vigilant of this. The problem is it's hard. People don't want to talk about it because it just sounds like you're downplaying anti-Semitism, but it's the opposite. These people don't care about anti-Semitism. These people, in fact, inflame it all over the place because they make real anti-Semitism basically impossible to decipher because there's so much pollution put out by the Israel lobby about all these smearing pro-Palestinian people as anti-Semitic. So, but it's definitely a trend. But you know, you had the Sikh temple massacre in 2012, which was Wade Michael Page, who was a neo-Nazi veteran of the U.S. military, and I shouldn't laugh because obviously it's not funny, but like he thought he was going, they were Muslim. You know, actually the Sikhs say this happens quite a lot because
it does. It's happened since 9/11.
Yeah, exactly, because they're more visible actually.
Correct.
So, and these knucklehead neo-Nazis, they're like, and this is what apparently Wade Michael Page, who killed 12 people, I think, in that attack, he thought they were Muslims. So they will go for everyone eventually. Like the group du jour is Muslims, but these people won't stop. They're white supremacists. They don't want anyone around who's not white. So it is really especially from the Israeli side, how they ally with these people and support them. I'm just like, these people are not going to be good to Jews at the end of the day when if they get into power.
And also we have this phenomena which we saw with the shooter in Norway. Wasn't it in Norway or something?
Oh yeah, Breivik.
Yeah. Where we saw he was anti-Semitic but pro-Zionist, because he said basically the guardians at the gates of the barbarians, right? Speaking of barbarians, about before that they serve all the Jews should leave and go there and then fight, and they'll kill each other, and it's, you know, it's good. One thing that's also very prescient and also very timely. If you remember Dylan Roof and what happened,
oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Rhodesia has become such a symbol and a sort of go-to, and of course I know because of the UK's history with Rhodesia.
I was watching a stream last night. I won't name it because I won't plug it, but the ad read for the stream was a lighter engraved with Rhodesia.
Really?
And it's a Zoomer stream.
Oh my God. Yeah, so Rhodesia, this kind of like nostalgia for Rhodesia, and you see these girls in like short skirt and like, you know, their bare chest with a I don't know, Uzi or something, and they're like, you know, we're gonna fight for the white race. Meanwhile, nobody, I mean, they don't really understand what happened in Rhodesia. They don't know the real history of what happened in Rhodesia. I wanted to ask, like, how is this sort of nostalgia for some of the colonial period, especially for the UK and Africa, part of this? And also, how does that connect with the type of accelerationist ideology that's now embedded from a lot of these people who are committing these attacks, which, okay, we call them lone wolves, but I believe it's much more organized than that.
Yeah, well, the first question is like, well, you know, there's this war on woke, right? And actually the opinion of the British population, which is, I guess, the majority, is that the British Empire was a bad thing and committed a lot of crimes, which obviously it did and was. But that is seen as a woke thing. So all these elements that are against woke say we should be proud of who we are. We should be proud of the British Empire. And it's very much about, it's the same as Trump, you know, make America great again, be proud of our history, warts and all. So and obviously there is actually quite a lot of academic support for this, in terms of, I mean, it's not good academic support, but people like Niall Ferguson and other revisionist historians have written a lot of stuff trying to kind of soften the impact, the reality of the British Empire. But British Empire was fascism abroad. You know, it was status of emergency. It was seen as like creating these, presented as, and still to this current day, as taking liberal democracy. Even those who criticize it say, well, that was the goal. Take it abroad, and constitutionalism and protection of private property and all these things. But actually, so much of the British Empire was living under a state of emergency, because whenever anyone would rise up, they'd just literally get rid of all the laws that they had apparently beneficently taken to these people. So it was all rubbish. But and actually, Trump's leading in this, you know, in terms of putting a new rhetoric on empire. In fact, a new rhetoric which is actually the old rhetoric, and he is explicit about it. He's like, we shouldn't be embarrassed about what we do. We shouldn't need to nice it up. And he does, like with Venezuela, he said, what did he say after he took Maduro? He said, we're going to go in and get the oil, and our big oil companies are going. Like, look, that's why Bush and Blair went into Iraq, but they didn't say that. So he's basically, and actually that national security document, which he published at the end of last year, which was the start of the Dunroe Doctrine, you know, it really is old style imperialism explicitly. It just says we own the natural resources of. He concentrated mostly on the Western Hemisphere, but you know, and the Roosevelt corollary was basically that we can interfere in any Latin American country that doesn't do what we say. And you know what? It never changed. It was always like that. After that, before that, but he's now saying it explicitly. So, like Guatemala, which we mentioned earlier, that was way later in the so-called halcyon days of like post Second World War internationalism and constitutionalism. That was one of them just destroyed the whole country. So it's never changed, but Trump's more obvious about it. So I think that he is super powerful in terms of the image he projects around the whole world. The world does follow, or the right does follow. So the right is following that rhetoric now and applying it to the British. And there is a big kind of thirst from the right to reevaluate the British Empire and present it as a good thing, and also to push for a resurgent empire, because we've opened and Brexit was a major part of this, by the way, because Brexit was presented by the people that did it as we'll break with the European Union and we'll go towards the United States, and we'll also it will be, they use the phrase global Britain, so we can actually go back. And so much of the rhetoric which came out subsequently was about we're going to go back to basically how we were before, so using the Commonwealth, but also like they opened a whole load of new bases in the Gulf, in Bahrain, Oman, UAE. Within a space of 3 years, new bases were. And this is a place where we were told Britain had withdrawn from in 1971. There's this big thing. Britain withdrew east of Suez in 1971, and it's kind of seen as the end of the British Empire, or in that region. And this was kind of a statement to say we're re-establishing ourselves there. So even in a material sense, the British Empire is being re-established. It never went away, but it's expanding again explicitly. And Brexit has been a massive part. But this is something that everyone should know about, is the British role, because I didn't understand it before I started Declassified UK. Like this book, and then my subsequent 2 books were mainly focused on the US, and the US was always kind of my interest because it's the most powerful country in the world. I lived there for a number of years, and then we started Declassified UK, and I was a bit like, England's not involved in this stuff, or not involved, but it's not important. And then you start looking into it, and you're like, Jesus Christ! Obviously, we don't have the power, the resources of the United States, but we're involved everywhere, and we do provide a significant function. And actually, this was a deal that was made after the Second World War, when the British establishment wanted to keep. They'd run the world for 200 years, and they didn't want to let go. So they basically signed a Faustian Pact with the US and said, we'll provide these things for you if we can hitch ourselves to American power. It started in Greece, like I mentioned. Actually, that the Truman Doctrine came a month after the British informed the Americans that we can't handle Greece anymore. We can't put down this rebellion. You're going to have to take over. And the State Department planner said, within the hour, the US had established itself as a world policeman. Then in Suez, when we invaded in 1956 after NASA nationalized the Suez Canal, that was a complete fiasco, and the US didn't back us. And then the British establishment, with those 2 events, and in that period, just realized we can't do unilateral empire anymore. We have to go with the United States. But if you look at everything, like if you look at Syria, the dirty war on Syria, MI6 were a key player in that, and in fact were involved in getting arms to Syria from Libya. If you look at the Gulf countries and like the UAE, Oman especially is basically still run by MI6. Like we never left. Yeah. But that the British has a huge role, especially in that region. Israel, like I've been working a lot on UK involvement in Gaza. It was the UK that was flying intelligence flights daily over Gaza for Israel. So there's a whole narrative that the British Empire, number one, was a good thing, and number 2, has ended. Those 2 things need to be smashed, especially the ended one, which is more widely prevalent. It didn't end at all. And actually, we provide a very important function for the US, because we still have 13 British overseas territories, which we retained, and they're very. If you look at a map where they are, it's kind of like global dominance. Obviously, not in size, but you've got like the Falklands in the South Atlantic. You've got the Caribbean possessions, which are all tax havens. So much of the finances of the world, like corporate tax avoidance, is done through them. Then you've got Singapore, Brunei, Kenya. We've got a massive base all over the Gulf. We've got bases. So. And all those bases.
Garcia, isn't that yours?
Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, which was opened up by Keir Starmer for Trump to bomb Iran.
Yeah.
And actually, interestingly, this is a really good example to show how Britain is just it's a master-slave relationship with the US and Britain. So we should give Diego Garcia back to Mauritius, or they should have jurisdiction, because that was ruled by the ICJ, right? And Keir Starmer finally applied that, or said he was going to. So the Chagos Islands were slated to be returned to Mauritius last year. And what they did, actually, there was a way around it. They said, we'll get a 99-year lease back on Diego Garcia so we can keep the military base. So it was a bit of a sleight of hand anyway. But anyway, a couple of months ago, or maybe even a month ago, they shelved the whole plan because Trump said no. And you're sort of like, well, this is the UK territory. So how does the American president have veto power over what happens to a UK territory? But that's the way it is. Underneath all the rhetoric about the special relationship, blah, 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 the British establishment basically did a deal to say we will do whatever we're told as long as we can be part of the empire and retain it. But Diego Garcia was used to bomb Iran. And Cyprus is that I've done so much work on the Cyprus bases, RF at Kriteri, which is this huge base. We again shows how the British Empire didn't end in 1960. We gave independence to Cyprus, or they won independence, but we retained 3% of the island, which we turned into massive intelligence and military assets. And importantly, to go to this whole same story, we opened them up to the Americans to make them joint bases unofficially. In the case of Diego Garcia, it's an official joint base, but in the case of Cyprus, it's unofficial. But all of those bases that I described and those sites are unofficially joint bases. So the Americans do very well out of us. Obviously, we were the main ones that went to Iraq and Afghanistan. It wasn't anyone else. And it doesn't have to be this way. This is what I say to people, because people say, well, we need to be protected. I'm like, well, look, is France a threat of invasion? It doesn't have any US troops. Does Spain? Is Spain okay? It doesn't play this enabling junior partner role. Yes, it's an ally of Washington, but it couldn't. The Pedro Sanchez told Trump that he can't use US bases in Spain or Spanish airspace for anything to do with Iran. It's unthinkable for that to happen in the UK. So we really, really need to change it here, because I think Trump's helping. To be honest, is turning a lot of people against the idea of being a supplicant of the US, but it needs to happen faster, because we provide, we like, the other thing is with the Iran thing, which is important, is RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, which is this base in West England. It's the only forward operating location that the US has in whole of Europe, which means that there's a runway long enough for heavy bombers. So that was they were bombing Iran from that, and that became a big scandal, I guess, to a certain extent, because journalists got photos of them loading bombs onto it. But we're heavily involved. This is like a bugbear of mine, man. And again, it's interesting. I didn't realize I was going to get understand. I didn't realize this evidence was there when we started Declassified UK, but it was just from looking into it. And none of it is in the mainstream media. None of it. Like, we have a worse mainstream media in the US on the national security kind of foreign policy stuff. It's just completely blanket propaganda, effectively. So, do
you condemn Hamas?
Yeah, exactly. No.
Yeah, sure. Well, before we let you go, I mean, we've kept you here for a while, but you said a bunch of amazing things in your last rant. We always say, history rhymes. I just finished recently reading All the Shah's Men, and it's funny you mentioned fascism abroad was the British policy, and while Iran was trying to nationalize their oil, they were saying, no, you don't get to nationalize your oil, but Britain was nationalizing their own resources simultaneously. And now the United States is sort of employing that exact policy that we saw the British do. You've got Venezuela, you don't get to have your oil, but the government here in the United States is buying up all kinds of corporations and almost nationalizing them. How much, and we also see the United States unrelenting support for Israel, much like the British did before. How much did the United States inherit British empires? My chat jokingly said, is the UK in the cuck chair now instead of the United States? So they're kind of on this sort of Anglo-Judean crusade together, or Anglo-Zionist crusade together. I'm not sure what it is, but where do you see this going? Since history rhymes, we know the British Empire, for all that it's worth, fell after the World War II and the Suez Crisis. What happens to the American Empire? With all of everything we've talked about today, the gutted military with ideologues and Nazis running around, these crazy people are now on the streets of the United States. We now have. So how do you see all of this going?
Yeah, I think that. Well, firstly, the British Empire wasn't anything like the US in terms of its military prowess, and no empire has been. So I don't know how that falls, because no one can touch America militarily. And the propensity when you have a hammer that big, everything starts to look like a nail, number one, but also when your economy's flailing and China's on the rise and your comparative advantage there isn't the same as it is militarily, the propensity also is to use the military because you have that advantage. So I think in the short term, we're going to see lots of, what we're seeing, lots of aggression. And it's apparently looks like it's going to go to Cuba next in a very real way. But to answer your question, I think in the long term, it's declining. It's in its terminal phase, and Trump is hastening that massively. And you're seeing that with the whole movement away from America in terms of its institutions and the global South is, and for a long time there wasn't another pole to organize around, like since the fall of the Soviet Union, and that was a major problem, I felt, because look, you don't have to like the Soviet Union, maybe you do like the Soviet Union, whatever, but the fact is there was more space in the liberation movements, for the globe, for independent movements in the global South to survive when there was a multipolar world and there was another pole to organize around. And Cuba's a good example. The Cuban Revolution would never have survived without the Soviet Union. It's just a fact. So the fact China's there and is growing, and they're much smarter than the Americans in terms of how they run their foreign policy and their domestic policy, I think that they'll take over. But I do think that, like you mentioned, the internal problems, I actually think that's probably a more likely way that the whole thing comes crumbling down, because American society is being stretched to breaking point. The inequality, like, I think that it's failed. Like things like Citizens United, the ruling in 2010, which basically just took any limits off the amount of corporate donations to the political system. It's just crazy. And the consequences of that, I don't see how, like, are going to be, the inequality is going to get more and more and more. The poor are going to have even less services. And when you have a society that destroyed, you can get societal collapse. So I think it's more likely that things are going to end internally than by some kind of event than externally. But who knows? It might be that Trump just liquidates democracy at the end of his term. I don't know. But the problem is, all the times, so you're talking about history, all the times we're talking about history, there hasn't been this. Well, there was during the Cold War, there was nuclear weapons, but we're talking about a different level of war, of imperial collapse now. That's the question is, like, does the world survive America's collapse? I don't know. Like, because even Israel, does the world survive Israel's collapse? Because that's another country that seems to be in terminal decline. And again, maybe the main problem is internally. Yeah, exactly. But
the Samson doctrine.
Huh?
The Samson option. We don't want the Samson option.
Yeah, no, exactly. But this is true, right? these are countries. Well, the US is off the charts in terms of its military, but like they won't go down without Israel won't go down without setting off nukes. So I just thought I fear that like we'll all be dead before before anything good happens in terms of like the collapse, because I just don't. I'm not hopeful in that. I mean, and Israel is probably the more likely one to set off nukes than anyone, you know. Like Trump's. I don't even know. I'd be interested in what you think. I don't feel he's that ideological. He's just he's an opportunist. He's an opportunist, and it works. Huh?
He's a careerist.
Yeah, and a careerist, and he wants power, and now fascistic stuff works for him. But if it wasn't, if he grew up in the Soviet Union, it'd be a communist. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. So, but the actual regime in Israel, I think they remind me of the Nazis, and I know you're not allowed to say that, but they really, really do. Like we
don't care.
They're insane. They are so insane and so vicious and demonic that they are. Well, we've seen what they've done, and they're not even finished yet. So I think that. That's a major component of all this that we have to be aware of, is the role of Israel, just because it is so powerful in terms of it's got the nukes, right? It's basically operated as a Western colony to de-develop and keep backward the West Asia, make sure all independence movements, resistance movements are smashed, make sure independent development is impossible. And in fact, a good example of that is Suez, right? In 1956, it was French and Britain and Israel that invaded, but it was British and French investors that were damaged by the nationalization. It wasn't Israel, but they just went in for the shits and giggles because they wanted to. They were like, well, look, Nasser's an independent nationalist that is taking control of his resources and has pan-Arabism as his goal. We want to end that, and that's the role they play, you know. They again and again and again. I mean, the level of destruction they have caused, not just recently, but since they started, is insane to me. But they worry me in the short term. They worry me even more than the United States, to be honest. But I don't know if that's wrong, but I don't know. I just feel that they're so crazy. I don't know if you guys have ever done interviews with some of these mad Zionists, but there's a guy called Jonathan Consirius, I think his name is. Conricus, that's it. Yeah, I did Piers Morgan with him one time, and I
was watching.
I saw it.
Yeah, he. I felt like he's terrifying. Like he's like this pure undistilled evil. And he served in Gaza. He must, I don't know what he got up to there, but you can guess. And yeah, I just feel like that. And it's the whole of their society is like that. So you've got all these people. It's hard to even contemplate because your mind kind of tries to deny it. But when you think people like that are actually the ones that are in air-conditioned rooms in Tel Aviv picking out targets, but those are the crazy people that are doing that. They're the ones flying the F-35s and the F-15s and dropping the bombs. They're all crazy. They're all demonic. So they're gonna. And I do think, like, again, this isn't popular among parts of the left because I think the evidence leads there, but I think that the US was kind of pushed into it. Obviously, that doesn't provide any. I'm not trying to take responsibility away from Trump. He's a war criminal that should be tried for the attack on Iran. But it's clear that Netanyahu was and Israel's been pushing for that war for so long, and apparently went to Washington and gave us a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if you saw this report in the New York Times about the preparation for it, and Netanyahu was like, "Well, the IRGC will collapse, and we can get regime change." And Trump was like, "Yeah, all right, let's do it." But it is a fact that the Israel lobby has an extreme amount of influence on the U.S. government, and so that again, when we're talking about U.S. empire, U.S. foreign policy, we have to be aware of Israel for that reason as well, because they have such sway over the elected politicians. Yes, and then the UK to finish. What's our role? You know, I don't know. I don't even know. Like, I had this phrase that I was saying in interviews for, which I stopped saying because people were getting angry. But I was like, our foreign policy is made in Washington, and Washington's foreign policy is made in Tel Aviv. So it's like a recipe for constant war and disaster. But I do like we have a very powerful Israel lobby, but generally the most powerful influence in our political system is the US. And it all goes back to that deal I explained earlier, where the British basically said, we'll do what we're told. It literally, our foreign policy is literally written in Washington. It's very, very hard to go against the United States. And even like to go back to the Iran thing, with the recent attack on Iran, it's true that the UK didn't join, right? Because I think it was even too crazy for the British establishment, which is like Iraq, like even Iraq and Afghanistan. It's like there were arguments and there was like wrangling and this was just out of nowhere. Right, we're going to bomb, and then no one knew what the reason was. They're like, well, 1 week it's like a democracy, and the next week it's like regime change, and then it's nuclear facilities. So it was a bit too far for the British. But then Keir Starmer said, we're not going to allow UK bases to be used. And then he reversed course and allowed UK bases, which basically made us a participant under international law. Hague Convention in the early 20th century, which is like a foundation of international law, says you can't allow the loading or like the movement of bombs across your territory or munitions across your territory that you know are going to be used in war. You can do it, but you can't claim to be neutral after that. So our neutrality was thrown up. But that was presented in the British media as Starmer standing up to Trump. So that's how low the threshold is for this stuff. Like, and then the Tories were up for us actually joining the bombing. I think so were Reform. So we have our political establishment is just pickled in the notion that we are the 51st state and we can't go against the United States. So it's horrible. It's horrible. Who knows what's going to happen in the future?
Who knows? And this conversation has been a tour de force. And
this was an amazing episode.
Amazing.
Thank you. It was good to talk to you guys.
We really appreciate you coming on and listen. This is something that needs to be spoken about. You know, we need to keep talking about this. We need to keep organizing. I think, you know, in terms of a call to action, there's a lot to be done here.
Yeah.
Because as you said, the left is in shambles. The kind of resistance to this is okay. Yes, the Shia are doing it in the axis of resistance and a few other places around the world. But other than that, we're seeing a retreat in many places, you know, and we're seeing empire at the doorsteps of Cuba now and many other places. So we have to be prepared for this. Matt Kennard, investigative journalist, co-founder of Declassified UK, author of Irregular Army. Tell us where people can find you on social media. And if you haven't bought this book, please purchase this book. It's very important.
Make sure you get this cover with the swastika on it, not the old one.
This was a new one.
Yeah. So this has got some new material. It's got a forward by Abby Martin and a long essay by me going over some of the things that Sarah mentioned about linking it to January 6th and Trump. But it's also interestingly got a afterward by John Kiriakou as well, the CIA whistleblower. And his one, I wanted him to do it because it kind of goes to kind of what we've been talking about. He was in the CIA from 1990 to 2004, but he was like very senior. He worked in the Directorate of Operations, and he was in Pakistan searching for Al-Qaeda militants on the border with Afghanistan. And then he ended up blowing the whistle on the torture program. I think because the Bush administration were going to try and pin it on him. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he gave an interview and he was sent to prison for 2 years. But his essay basically, it's called The Descent into Barbarism, and he kind of says what the unconstitutional acts that were done by the Bush administration and then carried on by Obama in terms of like the drone warfare and bombing American citizens without any judicial process, the Patriot Act, warrantless surveillance. He said kind of what I was saying earlier, which is that this all created the conditions for Donald Trump. That Trump is a outgrowth effectively of the war on terror. And he's a very interesting guy. He's kind of like I was looking the other day about different CIA whistleblowers, because obviously there was some during the Cold War that were very famous, but in terms of modern history, like he's basically the only one there's some from the NSA, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's like, there may be one other one, but I can't remember his name. But he's he's a very interesting guy, and he's getting more of a public profile now, which is good. I see him everywhere now, because one of the things that they say, I remember Daniel Ellsberg would say, like the way that they do that they stop whistleblowers is to just basically send a message when they blow the whistle, which is to destroy their lives. Don't let them get work, make it impossible for them to make a living, smear their personality. So it's always good to see someone when they manage to build a brand and make something for themselves. Because Thomas Drake, who actually sent a nice endorsement for the book, he was the NSA whistleblower. He was pre-Edward Snowden, but revealed similar things. Very heroic guy, and he was like he was raided and they tried to destroy him, and he ended up working in an Apple store. So and he hasn't been able to. Well, he doesn't have the same public profile, but definitely that essay is really good, and I'm really happy to have John Kiriakou in it. But you can buy the book on, I guess, all corporate places, but you can also buy it on All Books. It's published by All Books, which is a really good publisher, by the way. That people like they're really brave and publish a lot of stuff that other people won't publish. They published Norman Finkelstein books. They published Refaat Al-Ari's best-selling book after he was killed. So you check out their website for other stuff as well. It's like a treasure trove. But yeah, it was very good to talk to you guys.
It was
Thank you so much. You guys, all the links, there you go. All the links are below. Stick around. We're going to go over to China. We're going to let Matt go to bed or hang out with his two littles. Thank you again, Matt, for joining us. Guys, stick around, share the stream, go to the bathroom, get your water. We'll be back in about 30 minutes.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Matt.
Насколько нам известно, в Китае говорят, не виделись день, а как будто минуло 3 осени. Мы действительно рады очень вас видеть.
Вам всего самого доброго. Всего хорошего. Спасибо.
Так что я хочу вас поздравить с успешным прохождением этого виза. Хотя он только на 1 день. Но итоги большие, богатые. Он покажет, все реальное и историческое значение отношений между нашими странами.
Наши страны будут и далее сообща наращивать и углублять взаимодействие в сфере образования, опираясь на накопленный солидный опыт обоюдовыгодного и взаимообогащающего сотрудничества.
So, Putin in China.
China.
I wonder if the smell of sulfur is still there. If you guys don't recognize that quote, that's a famous.
That's a great one. That's a
great
classic.
quote. I wonder if it was. You know, I jokingly said Xi needed a palate cleanser.
He certainly got one. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, any thoughts on the Putin China visit before we dig into these? We have a lot of clips to get through. Plus, we have a wonderful heartfelt story from China. A nice little bit of pro-China propaganda. Where would we be without it? Kremlin dropping a big FU to Trump. Big Baltic Chihuahua kerfuffle. And of course, we have a little bit of an update on Israel and them acting just like Matt said they do. And we will end with the rant, which you're all waiting for, about the primary in Kentucky, the most expensive primary in the United States history, I guess in the history of the world, because nobody else behaves this way in politics. But first, we will talk about Putin's bromance in China. I love when these two get together. All right, so you guys saw the amazing edit put together by Rupley. This is Putin's address before his departure for China.
Дорогие китайские друзья, приветствую вас. Рад в очередной раз посетить Пекин по приглашению моего давнего доброго друга, председателя КНР Си Цзиньпиня. Регулярный обмен взаимными визитами и проведение российско-китайских переговоров на высшем уровне – важная, неотъемлемая часть наших совместных усилий по развитию всего комплекса отношений между двумя странами, раскрытию их по-настоящему безграничного потенциала. Напомню, что 25 лет назад Россия и Китай подписали договор о добрососедстве, дружбе и сотрудничестве, заложивший прочную основу для формирования подлинно стратегического взаимодействия и всеобъемлющего партнерства на благо наших стран и народов. И в настоящее время российско-китайские отношения достигли действительно беспрецедентного уровня. Их особый характер проявляется в атмосфере взаимопонимания и доверия, готовности сотрудничать на обоюдовыгодных и равноправных началах, вести уважительный диалог, оказывать друг другу поддержку в вопросах, затрагивающих коренные интересы двух стран, включая защиту суверенитета и государственного единства. Россия и Китай уверенно смотрят в будущее и активно развивают контакты в политике, экономике, оборонной сфере, расширяют гуманитарные обмены, поощряют межчеловеческое общение. То есть сообща делают все то, что служит углублению двустороннего взаимодействия и делу всемирного развития наших государств. Важно, что именно эти вопросы составят повестку дня предстоящих в Пекине переговоров.
He looks kind of angry. I don't know, not angry at China, but from you, I wanted a historical perspective because Putin says our relations have reached an unprecedented level, the highest they've ever been. What, and from a historical and geopolitical standpoint, what does that mean?
Well, it means, listen, I mean, the Russian Empire and China before the 20th century, they had a common border for centuries. But they were at times somewhat friendly, a little bit warm, oftentimes hostile to one another, especially on borders and border peoples, questions around Mongolia, Manchuria, Heilongjiang in the north, all these places. Also the border in Central Asia. Don't forget that some portions of that also belonged to the Soviet period and were a part of China and then part of the Soviet Union, then back to China. And it wasn't until 1949 to 1959, in that sort of period of time, where you had a deepening, really was up until the Sino-Soviet split, where you had a real deepening of the ties. The Soviet Union helped to build modern China. Soviet Union helped with its engineers to launch tremendous advances for the Chinese people in terms of industry, technology, education, and so on. And then China, after the Sino-Soviet split, took it on its own. The Soviet Union and China went to war with each other over the border and over issues. They were pitted against each other by the United States. This was part of Nixon's project as well, and Kissinger. And it wasn't until really 89 and the aftermath where the Chinese realized that, number one, they lost the Soviet Union, and they realized that that was a historic and strategic error on their part. And in order to counter that, they tried to deepen ties after 2000. Really, there were some attempts during the Yeltsin period, but it really was after in the 2000s, the Jiang Zemin period into the Hu Jintao period. And now under President Xi Jinping, it has become essential that they deepen ties to an extraordinary level. Why? Because both of them are the architects of what is built to be a new world order, a multipolar world order, a world order where they keep framing it as a just international order, not an order of hegemony and an order of unilateralism, but an order of multilateralism. So China and Russia today have the deepest connections. Why? Because both now are at a position in their history where they can mutually benefit one another, where they can learn from one another, and they can advance together. There's not an unevenness to the relationship. The relationship is one of equals. And that's very important, I think, for people to understand. China and Russia are both nuclear powers. They're both permanent members of the Security Council. They're the only two non-Euro-Atlantic members of the Security Council, permanent members of the Security Council. The others, of course, being United States, United Kingdom, and France. So you see, of course, 5 nuclear nations. Those are the only 2 in Eurasia. So I think it's important for people to understand and recognize that the historic partnership that we're seeing today is the result of decades of hard work on the side of Russia and China individually and also collectively. And we've seen them help and weather tremendous storms. And they will continue to do that, I think. And their ties are deepening. This was a sort of 25 years or so of deepening of partnership. That will continue. And I think that we are not going back to a period where they will be pitted against each other. I think they both understand that they are essential for one another's security. They both border each other, and they both understand that together they hold a tremendous amount of the world's populations, resources, and land, sort of land territory-wise. Russia is the biggest country. China is also an extremely large country, and they have tremendous assets that they can build from one another. So I think that that's, in a way, to sort of frame it, both of them see each other as important allies, strategic partners, and they understand that the U.S., while they want good relations with the U.S., they understand that the U.S. cannot be trusted and will maintain a hostile position towards them. And that's why you saw today, you saw from the presidential administration's team that was there, President Putin's team, you saw a comment from somebody. I don't know if we have the clip.
We do.
Okay, we should play that because I think that that will explain everything that needs to be said.
Не пришло ли время забыть уже про дух Анкориджа и говорить про дух Пекина, например, или что-то такое?
Ну, наверное. Дух Пекина существует. Я не знаю про дух Анкориджа. Я ни разу не употреблял это словосочетание.
You have there Yuri Ushakov, who's one of the core people around President Putin's team. And now you have the spirit of Anchorage, the spirit of Beijing. And clearly the spirit of Anchorage is out the window. And the spirit of Beijing is here to stay.
I've never mentioned spirit of Anchorage once in my life. Like he was so like disgusted. He's like, I've never said that.
Yep. So there you go. And I think that, listen, Trump said that he would end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. We're now going into almost the second year here. We're now entering into almost half of Trump's presidency, and we still don't have an end. In fact, we see a deepening of the conflict. So in that sense, I think that the spirit of Anchorage has slowly waned and disappeared. And we have the spirit of Beijing, which remains, and China remains as a staunch ally of the Russian Federation.
I did think it was important to note that Russia definitely picked up the pace in Ukraine on the heels of Putin's visit to Beijing. And we'll go over some of the statements while Putin was there. But yeah, I guess Putin, or maybe Russia heard me complaining. But I was complaining about, I was like, what's going on in Ukraine? And then like 2 days later, 2 days in a row, huge strike. So the pace there has also picked up while these trips are happening. And what like we note on this show often is that Russia likes to be very symbolic, metaphorical. They like to send messages like that. So pay attention to timing and things along, and pay attention to what they say in these statements. A lot of them I'm going to be watching for the first time with you guys. So let's get started. This first one is Putin's opening statement in Beijing.
Уважаемый господин председатель, господин Си Цзиньпинь, дорогой друг, уместно будет употребить китайскую поговорку. Насколько нам известно, в Китае говорят, не виделись день, а как будто минуло 3 осени. Мы действительно рады очень вас видеть. Мы сверяем постоянные часы, и лично, и через наших помощников, через правительство. Я тепло вспоминаю, как в прошлом году мы здесь имели возможность вместе принимать участие в праздновании 80-летия Победы во Второй мировой войне.
They are like, it's a little gay. These two are, this is a bromance. I don't think there's any two world leaders that are as close as Putin and Xi, like on an actual friendly level. Xi has called him his best friend, his most valuable friend, personal friend, not political friend. And here's Putin whipping out Chinese proverbs about how much he misses him when he's not there. This is pretty serious. I mean, I'm jokingly saying that it's gay, but this is very serious for political entities of this magnitude to actually amicably get along, not just do it because it's all in our best interests.
And we can't forget that the third one in that sort of, if you were to think of it as a triangle, is Kim Jong-un.
A throuple, if you will.
Extremely warm.
Oh, warm. him and the Russians. He's just there. It's really kind of incredible to see, because you don't. It's almost surreal. And I maybe I'm being a little bit girl fan about it, but it's interesting to see them. To see people's best interests, what they believe to be their best interests align, and them actually get along and be kind to one another. Like actually kind.
Listen, because we've traveled a lot to the Middle East, it's very Middle Eastern. It has that flair. Like we have the famous clip, we love it, when Nelson Mandela sees Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, and he's like, "My leader, my leader." You know, that's sort of we love that. We love that. This is a global South way of being a leader. Very warm, you know, Ahmadinejad and Chavez hugging and kissing each other, and Chavez and this kind of stuff, and I'm an eternal Arab and this. But we never see it from Euro-Atlantic leaders. I mean, they awkwardly hug each other, or, you know.
No, they don't hug. Well, have you ever seen Trump hug Macron?
Oh, God, no.
Or when people hug Meloni and she's like.
Yeah, but also you have like the Albanian leader, like, you know, kissing her hand.
Bow down to her.
Everyone
should bow down to Queen Meloni, by the way.
There you go.
Our Italian queen. Yes, Putin and Xi made blinis together. That's a great clip. On this trip, Xi presented him with a huge painting of the two of them together. It's absolutely incredible. I don't know if we have a clip of it, but I did post it on the big account. What were we gonna say?
Wait, they have a new painting? I wonder.
Oh yeah, it's enormous. It's enormous. Okay, here's another clip. This is also Putin in China. This is him in China talking about the 25-year pact.
25 лет назад между нашими странами был подписан договор о добрососедстве, дружбе и сотрудничестве, фундаментальный межгосударственный документ, являющийся основой для развития сотрудничества по всем направлениям и в полной мере сохраняющий свою актуальность. Сегодня наши отношения вышли на беспрецедентно высокий уровень, являя собой образец подлинно всеобъемлющего партнерства и стратегического взаимодействия. Не случайно в составе нашей делегации большая часть правительства Российской Федерации, руководители бизнеса, представители общественных и образовательных организаций. Сейчас, как условились с господином председателем, начнем нашу работу с обсуждения ключевых вопросов двустороннего взаимодействия, прежде всего в сфере экономики. а затем продолжим переговоры с участием делегации, как вот только что предложил господин.
Interesting. The Americans bring Tim Apple, all the business guys, everybody who wants to engage in the second, I guess, grape of China, grape of Nanking, if you will. But Russia brings education. Russia brings culture. They do they do more of a actual relational exchange, not superficial at all. Very interesting.
Listen, we're seeing the building of a new world order, and these two know how to do it. That's for sure.
I really am impressed with this visit now that I'm watching even more of the clips. Usually, you know, state visits, especially with Putin, I get real fangirl rah-rah, and I sort of kang a bit. But I'm actually pretty surprised at the strong messaging coming out of this visit. This is them talking. I guess we're no longer talking about a multipolar world. Now we're talking about a polycentric world. Let's see.
Yes.
Наше сотрудничество во внешнеполитических делах – один из главных стабилизирующих факторов на международной арене. Идет сложный процесс формирования полицентричного мира, основанного на балансе интересов всех его участников. Вместе с китайскими друзьями отстаиваем культурно-цивилизационное многообразие и уважение суверенного развития государств, стремимся к построению более справедливого демократического мироустройства. В нынешней напряженной ситуации на международной арене наша тесная связка особенно востребована. Наращиваем координацию в ООН, БРИКС, группе 20 и на других площадках. Продолжим активное взаимодействие с Шанхайской организацией сотрудничества. Уверен, что вместе достойно отметим в этом году 25-летие ШОС, ставший прекрасным примером справедливого разрешения проблем и содействия интеграции в обширном общем регионе.
What do they mean by polycentric? Is that like now we have these kind of influence spheres, and what is that? What does polycentric mean as opposed to multipolar?
So both of them are used in Russia amongst the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Both of them are used. Polycentric is sometimes stressed more so than multipolar. And the reason for that is that polycentric denotes sort of spheres of civilizations, sort of civilizational spheres. Multipolar still has sort of like hierarchical sort of poles of power that then project that power. Polycentric is much more, you could say, civilizational. That there are there are different centers of there's, you know, like there was in ancient times, there was Rome and there was Egypt and there was China and the Indus Valley civilization. That's how they see it. But both of them are used interchangeably in IR, in common parlance. But they have some minor discrepancies as to what people mean by them and what they're trying to convey in that. Multipolar is a result of thinking about bipolar, unipolar, multipolar, trying to look at that in stages.
Right. Polycentric feels like more of a development of that multipolar theory.
It's like we're moving a different stage of IR development in the world.
I kind of like polycentric more than multipolar.
Yes,
but
I use it.
Harder to say. Like we can't. But at DD Geopolitics, we say things like "Welcome to the multipolar world" or "Transcending borders in a multipolar world." I don't know that a polycentric world has the same ring to it.
It might convey, you know, some people may come in at the wrong time and say they're polyamorous. Like, what's going on? Like, what, poly what?
Poly what?
They're poly what? I know they went to Iraq and Iran, but poly what? You know?
Not again. The Americans must have gotten to them.
I like it.
Continue on with our fruitful Beijing bromance meeting.
China, and today's visit is very special because this year marks the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Treaty of Good Neighborliness, and thanks to this treaty, principles of mutual trust and mutual benefit, our relationships dynamically develop for the well-being of our two nations. Today's negotiations with Chairman Xi Jinping were very fruitful and resulted in a number of documents signed, including a joint statement of heads of states that formalizes our joint approaches to almost all principal areas of work. Together.
Okay. Okay, and here's the important one. This is the one I picked.
Наша страна является одним из крупнейших экспортеров КНР нефти, природного газа, включая сжиженный, и угля. Мы, конечно, готовы и далее надежно обеспечивать бесперебойные поставки всех этих видов топлива на быстрорастущий китайский рынок.
This is important. Why? Huge. This is probably Putin's most, for me, in addition to the 40 plus documents that were signed, this is the most important thing that Putin said in regards to current state of international geopolitics. Obviously, all the China-Russia stuff is unprecedented and historical. This is important because we've talked about it a little bit on the show. Other political analysts are also talking about Richie Medhurst put together an entire, basically what amounts to a PhD dissertation on the fact that what Trump was doing was isolating China from their energy providers through these wars, the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, the defanging of Venezuela. They've messed around with Nigeria as well. They're trying to get the Gulf monarchies to turn their back on China, et cetera, et cetera. And here's Russia saying you could do all of that, but we are going to ensure that their energy goes uninterrupted.
Correct.
This is a crushing blow to Trump.
Absolutely, because Russia is diverting its energy supplies from the European market to the Chinese market. And focusing on the global South market, but on its essential partners, of course, China being one of them. So China will be taken care of. That's for sure. There's no doubt about it.
So what does this mean now? We have, and Richie, and guys, I will shout him out again. Richie Medhurst put an incredible amount of work into that. He did put it on Substack and it's all over his X. You guys should really read it, whether you agree with it or not. I don't agree with all of it, but just the amount of work, respect to Richie Medhurst. But he proposes that, we have we have a blockade in the Caribbean. We have a blockade basically around the Arabian Peninsula, where he talks about the Strait of Malacca. He also talks about the Arctic, the Arctic theater that could be, that he thinks that there could be impose a blockade there. This kind of says none of that even matters.
Correct. No, it's true. It's true. I think one thing that's clear is that, listen, in some places, Russia was unable, given the situation, to intervene. And many people criticize Russia for Syria, for many other places. But in the case of strategic, not only partnership, but even if you think about it in more, military terms, strategic depth, China, the DPRK are essential for Russia. They're essential to have them and to be stable because they expose Russia, just like China requires a stable Russia, because that part exposes China. So I think that they understand that there's a symbiosis here for their security, their stability, and their prosperity, that they need to have that partnership. And I think that they want to ensure that the areas in their geographical sphere are also stable, which is why both of them play an enormous role in Iran.
Well, let's take a look at, we have one clip of Xi, and then we'll hit you with the feel-good story, and we'll close out this segment.
We must develop high-quality international cooperation, reforming and perfecting our global governance. This world is far from being calm. The damage imposed by unilateral actions and hegemony is off the scales. It threatens to bring us back to the law of the jungle. In this sphere, I would like to propose the concept of the single fate for humankind and a global initiative that enjoys wide support from the international community, including Russia. Being permanent members of the UN Security Council, Russia and China will show themselves as responsible world powers, protecting the authority of the UN and the world's justice, countering any manifestation of unilateralism and any attempts at reversing history, provocations aimed at denying the outcome of World War II, trying to revive the ghosts of Nazism and fascism. We're ready to work hand in hand on forming a new, more rational and fair system of world governance. The world towards prosperity. The great Russian-Chinese friendship is in line with the demands of time. We will move forward steadily, confidently, and relentlessly, achieving new great heights. Thank you.
I knew you were going to love that one.
I love it. I love it.
And before the chat even starts with their bull crap, you guys get all weird when people say they're going to fight fascism. When China and Russia say they're going to fight fascism, they're literally fighting like liberalism, basically. What you guys would call liberalism.
You mean the liberal world order? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, this neoliberal will come on.
I just have to clarify because our vocabulary in the West is a little bit twisted, but they're not out here calling everybody Nazis or, you know, saying we're going to go fight for the Jews or saying, you know, we've got to get out here and fight against racism or neo-Nazism. They're saying like we have to fight against this international system of fascism, corporatocracy.
Yes. You're absolutely right. And see how they say we have a shared fate. There's one. You see how they're linking it in that way. They're not saying they're not differentiating. They're saying our fate is sealed together as one. That's big. I'm telling you, that's
huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. So here's your feel-good story for the China wrap-up. 25 years was the point of this visit, the sort of the theme. Well, 25 years ago, a Chinese man, as a boy, met Putin, and here is his story.
Человек, которого вы видели на фотографии, это я. Меня зовут Бенбай, русское имя Паша, 36 лет. Сейчас я старший инженер муниципальной компании. Мы договорились о поездке в парк Бэйхай. Затем я услышал, что президент России Владимир Путин во временно увидел свою поездку в парк Бэйхай. Мы последовали за тобой, чтобы увидели президента. Я также был в более высоком положении на каменных прилах. Затем помахал ему рукой. А затем внезапно увидел, как он вышел с полосной охранской, подошел ко мне. Затем он снял меня с каменных перил и поцеловал в лоб. В то время я сделал эту фотографию и понять меня имел, что это имеет мою жизнь. Если бы у меня была возможность, если я увидел президента Путина, я хочу сказать ему: уважаемый президент Путин, мальчик, с которым вы сфотографировались 25 лет назад, теперь старший инженер, а вы выглядите по-прежнему. Очень надеюсь, что вы снова приедете в Китай.
Before people say fake news, this story was actually done by RT, I think over a year ago, because the picture now is 26 years old. So on the 25-year anniversary of the picture, before the visit was even planned, they did this special on this man. Peng Pei, or aka Pasha. I love that my Russian name is Pasha. But of course, in pure Chinese and Russian fashion, they reunited Putin with Pasha, and Putin signed the original photograph. I won't play the whole clip, but here's just a visual.
Great surprise for me too that 26 years later I have this opportunity now to see you again. I was happy to learn that you made a decision to receive your higher education in Russia and you studied in Moscow. So they met. They spoke in Russian. Putin signed the photo. Really nice story. And there's his dad. He says to Putin, you haven't changed.
I love it. It's very heartwarming. It's very heartwarming. This is why people look up to these leaders and see them as not true men, true human beings with a heart, with a soul. Do you see people talking about world leaders in the West like that?
Trump really inspired me.
You know, I don't see it.
I'm trying to think of something to finish that sentence, but I can't think of who would be what he would be inspiring me to do.
Yikes. Maybe not the good thing.
Anyway, a place we haven't spoken about in a while, and thankfully we haven't spoken about it in a while, is the Baltics. Terrible transition to that. I don't know, man. They're going crazy up there. I guess a week ago or so, one of the ministers threatened Kaliningrad. And for our viewers who don't know, Kaliningrad is obviously Russia. It's on the coast of the Baltics, and it's it's something that's been a soft spot for the Baltic Chihuahuas. They like to bring it up every once in a while, so they brought it up. They said we really should invade Kaliningrad. We have to show that Russia has a weak spot. Well, they asked Lavrov for a response to that.
Не слишком ли много ли себе глава МИД Литвы позволяет заявлениями про Калининград? Глава МИД Литвы.
Кто это? Мы, по-моему, ему уже ответили. Вы знаете, это надо как-то оставлять за рамками внимания и поменьше уделять и передавать значение. Так что я перестал их читать. Им надо как-то подтвердить, что они существуют. Только в отличие от известного философа, который говорил: «Я мыслю, значит, я существую». Эти просто существуют.
I like he's a card. He's just throwing out his Descartes.
Daggers. He said, "I don't know her." Like he literally pulled a Mariah Carey. I don't know her. He said, "I only read them to remember that they exist."
Yeah. Who are they?
Right. Well, anyway, so on this continues. Obviously, we have the Kaliningrad threat, and then there's some drones. Right. There's a drone, a Ukrainian drone that happens to go shot down over Estonia. Here's a clip of that.
Metal debris has been scattered across a field near Kablakula, Estonia, after NATO air forces shot down a stray Ukrainian military drone. The latest cross-border drone incident that has caused a political uproar in the Baltic states. According to a statement from the Estonian military, the drone entered the country's airspace at around noon local time on Tuesday, coming from Russia and into the southeastern part of the country. Estonian defense minister said that the drone was then shot down by a Romanian F-16. No damage was reported. Ukraine has apologized for the incident, blaming Moscow for deliberately knocking Ukrainian drones launched at legitimate military targets in Russia off course. Earlier this month, 2 Ukrainian drones hit an empty oil storage site in Latvia. Similar incidents were reported by Estonia and Latvia in March.
A stray Ukrainian drone, and they're blaming it on Russia. Classic.
Yes, I'm crying. Russia comes out and says, "Okay, well, this wasn't Russia's doing. Like Ukrainian drone, a Romanian F-16 shoots it down."
What's a Romanian F-16 doing in Estonia?
Who the hell knows?
It's a little bit far from home, if you ask me.
SVR issued a statement. I don't have the statement, but that's all right. So here we go. We have here's Latvia, with Russia's launching yet another disinformation campaign against Latvia, spreading lies that Ukraine plans to use Latvia as a base for attacks on Russian territory. The SVR, when they issued their statement, did mention that they were utilizing not only the airspace, but the ground to launch attacks on Russia.
Yeah.
And from the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there is no truth in Moscow's latest set of falsehoods accusing Ukraine of preparing attacks on Russia from the territory of Latvia. We officially refute them. And obviously down here, Russia is lying about Latvia, allowing any country to use Latvian airspace and territory to launch attacks against Russia or any other country. But Latvia is issuing warnings to their citizens what to do in the case of a drone incident. Here's a photo of the Lithuanian government in a bunker. What?
Did you see that? Go back. Due to Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. Look at the language. The incursion of unidentified drones into the Baltic states may occur more and more frequently. Oh, maybe what's going on there? More and more frequently, huh?
And if we weren't propagandizing, oh, here I have this statement. Ukraine is preparing strikes on Russia from Latvia's territory. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Service has stated. The main point of the SVR statement is such. The Zelensky regime is determined to demonstrate to its ideological and financial patrons in Europe the preservation of the combat potential of the armed forces of Ukraine and their ability to damage the Russian economy. Kiev does not intend to limit itself to using the air corridors provided to the armed forces of Ukraine by the Baltic states. Drones are planned to be launched from the territories of these countries as well. The hope is that such tactics will significantly reduce the time of approach to targets and increase the effectiveness of terrorist attacks. Despite Latvia's fears of becoming a victim of Moscow's retaliatory strikes, the Kiev authorities convinced Riga to agree, that's the capital of Latvia for those who don't know, to agree to conduct the operation. The current rulers of Latvia's phobia of Russia have proven to be stronger than their ability to think critically and their sense of self-preservation. Members of the armed forces of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces have already been sent to Latvia. They are stationed at the Latvian military bases of Adazi, Sili, Lielvard, Daugavpils, and Jekabpils. The coordination of the decision-making centers in Latvia are known, and the country's membership in NATO will not protect the accomplices of terrorists from just retribution, according to the Russian Foreign Intelligence Services.
There you are. There you have it.
After that statement is when like, yep, they went crazy. Because they don't want that smoke. But here's the government in the bunker. Just like their Israeli cousins.
Yeah, they love doing this stuff. Like, oh my God.
Look at what they're doing to the kids. See, here's the thing. The propagandization of people is not okay. Look, here's children in a Ukrainian Lithuanian school. Congratulations, Latvia or Lithuania. You're giving birth to a new class of American boomers. This is what all of our parents did, is hide under desks from Russian nukes and forever were plagued by Russophobia. So I guess you'll be doing that now. I don't know. This is psychotic to me.
It's sad. It's sad to see. Listen, and it's so performative. It's so performative.
There's one drone.
One. That was in a field. You saw it was like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, one drone. So we go crazy, make kids go under, terrorize kids, make them go under desks, tell them it's the Russians' fault, even though it's an errant Ukrainian drone. And you're planning on engaging in warfare from your territory to put these kids in even more danger, but it's Russia's fault. See, this is the psychosis that they built over time. And speaking of psychosis, let's switch over to Ben Gvir.
Oh.
I didn't even know what had been going on. But I knew that there's another flotilla heading to, flotilla heading.
Many friends are on it.
Who's on it?
Fra Hughes, who have been getting up and posting that as well. We had a whole bunch of people that I have in my group chat that were over there. And of course, last time, the last flotilla, Ben Gvir also brutalized.
Well, this is horrific. So I'm going to give you a warning, because this actually kind of there's not gory or explicit. It just really kind of startled me, like psychologically. I'm going to give you a fair warning, but this is barbaric.
Free Palestine! Check it. ברוכים הבאים לישראל, אנחנו בעלי הבית. ככה צריך. ישראל חי. ישראל חי. כן. זיכוי, כל המטרה כאן זה לראות שאין אנשים בתהליך. לא להתרגש מהצעקות שלהם, לא להתרגש.
This is a war crime. Just so everybody knows.
For sure. It's also, listen, we are all Amalek to them.
This is terrifying to me.
I know. That's how they treat those flotilla participants are experiencing how Palestinians are treated.
Exactly. And I want to say this. offend people. I'm going to try to say it as sensitively as I can. We expect this kind of behavior from them towards Palestinians because of the way that they outwardly dehumanize Palestinians. But it's a really good wake-up call for you to see them doing this to Westerners and Europeans because they don't give a fuck. They have dehumanized all of us.
They don't care. They don't care.
They really don't care. So this caused somewhat of an uproar. I don't even know if I want to take this that seriously. So here we go. We'll mention her again. Here's a little bit of the Twitter drama that it evoked. Up here is Gideon Sarv, who says, "You deliberately caused damage to the state in this disgraceful performance, and not for the first time. You squandered enormous professional and successful efforts made by many, many people, from IDF soldiers to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs employees and many other fine individuals." And then Itamar Ben-Gvir obviously fires back that you guys don't know how to behave towards supporters of terrorism. Israel's foreign minister is expected to understand that Israel has stopped being a pushover. Anyone that comes to our territory to support terrorism and identify with Hamas will get slapped, and we won't turn the other cheek. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel has every right to prevent provocation flotillas of Hamas terrorist supporters from entering our territorial waters and reaching Gaza. However, the way that Minister Ben-Gvir dealt with the flotilla activists is not in line with Israel's values and norms. I have instructed the relevant authorities to deport the provocateurs as soon as possible. I'm guessing that that was my existence. I didn't even get to read the last statement when I first read that, because I read the first one and I was like, so you're upset that Ben-Gvir was mean to some like Europeans on a flotilla, and this is what's damaging to your reputation? This is it? This is the thing that's going to break the camel's back, no pun intended, of Israel's reputation? Give me a fucking break. We've watched a genocide for 3 years.
Not only that, and how many wars? 8 countries at war, basically. 7
Right.
countries.
But it's this last message, the Prime Minister of Israel post, that gets me. This would have never come out if people didn't cause a stink. And it was Maloney, apparently, who caused a stink. The images of the Israeli minister Ben-Gvir are unacceptable. It is inadmissible that these demonstrators, including many Italian citizens, are subjected to this treatment that violates human dignity. The Italian government is blah, 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 blah. They demand an apology, which is interesting. They're not going to get one, but you know, that's an escalation, I guess, in the on the political theater ladder, demanding an apology from Israel.
And not only that, summoning the ambassador to request formal clarifications is like, that's an escalation on the diplomatic.
Right. And I was sarcastic earlier. I was calling her Queen Maloney. Italians are, for the most part, very, I don't want to say that they're supportive of Palestine as much as they are. There's a very large Italian contingent.
Sure.
But they are very against just this thing in its entirety. It's not just about a free Palestine thing. They're against it from the military side of it. They're against the supplication of weapons. Or the supplying of weapons. They're against all of it. It's not
They got everything.
It's not just a liberation movement. It's holistic. And she doesn't really understand that. So I think that, you know, she's doing it out of a need to do it. To appease the Italians. The Italians will go on general strike. They've done it more than once for Palestine. And so there's that. So I don't think that her heart's really in it, but she did demand an apology. So I am a little bit torn. But then we also have a weird message from Mike Huckabee that came out while we were streaming. He says that he calls the actions of Ben-Gvir despicable. Flotilla was a stupid stunt, but Ben-Gvir betrayed the dignity of his nation.
Well, we know what Ben-Gvir's response is going to be. He's going to say, "We don't need the Americans."
Yeah,
he says it all the time. We don't.
This feels like a setup, though. Why are they? Well, maybe it's just easy to be. You know, Ben-Gvir is a very convenient villain. He always plays the villain. You know, he was the one who came out a couple weeks ago. It was like screaming about the terrorists in Syria, and it was like, okay, well, he goes, you know,
with the cake. The noose. We had
the noose. Yeah, the noose. He always does the big spectacle. So it'll be another big spectacle that goes probably undisciplined.
But the actual killing of hundreds of thousands of people is no big deal. You see, that's why this is spectacle. This is actually in my like 5D chess brain. This is Hasbara as well.
Yeah,
this helps to deflect. Right
exactly. This is damaging the reputation, bitch.
Right now, the largest ethnic cleansing since the Nakba, and even bigger than the Nakba, is happening in Lebanon. But who cares?
Flotilla people.
people.
And not for nothing, the flotilla people, respect to you and all of that. But yeah, exactly. It's deflecting these people. We're making the worthy victims, right? We can't make the worthy victims out of the Lebanese, because then that'll evoke sympathy. We can't have that. We can't have people realizing and talking about what's going on in South Lebanon. 1 million people displaced. It's double digits, or like it's either in the 5 or 6 digits of deaths. It's insane, and we're sitting here throwing a big fuss because of how Ben-Gvir well, we aren't, but the world collective is throwing a big fuss about how Ben-Gvir treated some flotilla Europeans and Americans. That's a really good point. It is. They're both horrible, but they are not equally bad. Let's be clear.
What I'm saying is that you see how they weaponize the media. You see how the kind of selective rage. Of course.
That was a really good point you brought up. It's the deflection. It's this. Look at how horrible this is. And look, we're capable of calling out bad Israel action. See, we're calling them out on how mean they were to the flotilla people.
Yep.
I don't like it. It feels yucky.
I know. I hear you.
As lastly, speaking of Israel and feeling yucky, the Kentucky primary. Now, I know people were kind of going back and forth in the comments. We're not talking about it because the seat itself is important. You'll realize why we're talking about it. First, let's start with Trump's. This is Trump from today, I believe.
Said to Prime Minister Netanyahu about Iran and how long to hold off on strike.
He's fine. He'll do whatever I want him to do. He's very, very good man. He'll do whatever I want him to do, and he's a great guy. To me, he's a great guy. Don't forget, he was a wartime prime minister, and he's not treated right in Israel, in my opinion. I'm right now at 99% in Israel. I could run for prime minister, so maybe after I do this, I'll go to Israel, run for prime minister. I had a poll this morning. I'm 99%, so that's good. But no, he's a wartime prime minister, and I just don't think they treat him well.
Mr. President, what do you do?
I think they have a president over there that treats him very poorly.
You're on the same page with him on Iran?
Yeah.
I love that Trump comes out today and says, I'm in control. He does whatever I tell him to do. Our elections tell me different. Okay? Our elections and your behavior tell me a completely different story. That's the story here. Not that just that Massey lost a seat, but who's really in control? Who is really in control? And it's not Netanyahu. We'll talk more about that. So what does this election sort of teaches us, right? That we know the money came from 3 billionaires: Miriam Adelson, Paul Singer, and John Paulson. So Miriam Adelson, you all know, Sheldon Adelson's widow. Paul Singer is the man. He gave $1 million to Kentucky, the MAGA Kentucky PAC, publicly. And then John Paulson gave $250,000. Plus, AIPAC gave $4 million. The Republican Jewish Coalition gave another $4 million. And the MAGA Kentucky PAC, that is run by Trump's campaign managers, La Savita and Fabrizio, gave $7.5 million. And Christians United for Israel, or Kufi, John Hagee's outfit, those psychos, they spent over 6 figures on billboards alone. So, to give you an idea of what sort of, who's actually in control. So Thomas Massey obviously lost his primary. See, it's the most expensive House primary in American history. The discourse around it is absolutely psychotic. We're going to start with my favorite psycho, Loomer, who says that the Kentucky election must have Russian interference. Why? Because RT posted her video. This is what we're dealing with in America. This is the type of reasoning. And this person is a high-level advisor to Trump.
That was literally her video.
Yeah, that's her video. And I'm going to play the video. Because it's just comedic gold. Like, it's incredible. So that was her on election day. She's accusing Thomas Massey of Russian election interference The evidence being that RT covered him, which and the clip she shows is her clip. She says, Massey says Israel is interfering in his election, but so far I just see Russian and Iranian interference.
Weren't we the ones that called out Russiagate, and they were also saying that Russiagate? Well,
So,
you see,
and here's the clip she shared. So this is important anyway, because I wanted to show the clip. This is one of Laura Loomer's employees harassing Thomas Massey months ago. Many of you might recall.
So, Congressman, in the last 2 weeks, you repeated AOC's talking points on Venezuela, and Jasmine Crockett has retweeted you. When will you change your party affiliation to Democrat?
I thought you knew. I vote with Republicans 91% of the time.
And
the 9% I don't, they're taken up for pedophiles, starting another war, or bankrupting our country.
First of all, Laura Loomer, hire men that have gone through puberty. I can help if you need them. Secondly, that last sound bit is it. I vote with them 91% of the time. And when I don't, it's when they're protecting pedophiles and putting us in new wars. Okay.
There you go.
So, and here is Massey's famous clip from the House floor. Again, just as a reminder.
That is wrong. Do not let the Senate muck this bill up. And if you're a party to that in the Senate, you are part of this cover-up that we are trying to expose. I am sorry if one of your billionaire donors is going to get embarrassed because he went to Rape Island. That is what they have coming. In fact, they need to be on the other side of bars, a lot of them. Some of them will be embarrassed, but some of them need to go to prison.
Don't forget what MTG revealed, and she revealed it again, poignantly, on purpose. In her private discussions with President Trump, he looked at her right in the face and said, we can't release the files. It'll hurt my friends. And what else did MTG tell you? You're not going to vote yourselves out of this.
Yep.
That's why the loss of the seat isn't what's important. I mean, it's sad. But this is another nail in the coffin if people don't use it as a teachable and wake up moment.
Yep.
And I think Thomas Massey knows as well, because here he is at his concession speech.
All right. Listen, I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrein in Tel Aviv. I did get the call through, though. I have called and conceded the race. We've been honorable the whole time, and we're going to stay that way.
Right. So he knows. He knows who beat him. And I think you could kind of tell that he's not even sad. Well, maybe he's sad. He's not even angry. He's just like...
He's not listen, the fight continues. He's not phased.
So, and I just want to remind you again, the money came from mostly the individuals were Miriam Adelson, Paul Singer, and John Paulson. So Paul Singer is the Venezuela connection here. He gave $1 million. Again, he gave $1 million to Kentucky APAC, or the Kentucky PAC, sorry, MAGA PAC. He bought Citgo, Venezuela's U.S. oil subsidiary, at rock bottom prices when Trump kidnapped Maduro in January. His investment became worth billions, like exponentially went crazy. Massey was one of the most vocal opponents of the Venezuela regime change in Congress. He co-sponsored war powers resolutions to stop it. He said on the record, it is not American oil, it is Venezuelan oil. And then Singer donated $1 million to defeat him.
Yep.
Ed Galrein. Who the hell is this guy? Nobody knows. I've asked everybody. Nobody knows who this guy is. I've even asked people in the Navy. He claims that he's SEAL Team 6. Cool. Most people that were or are SEAL Team 6 don't talk about it unless it's public knowledge. He claims he's SEAL Team 6. Hegseth said he rose into leadership within the elite ranks of SEAL Team 6, one of the most demanding combat organizations on planet Earth. He was probably like a logistician or something. but because his record is completely classified, completely sealed. And he brags endlessly about countless deployments to the Middle East, to Latin America, but he can't say anything specific about them. Not even where they were, not even the countries. In other words, this dude's probably a fucking liar. Okay? Secondly, he refused to debate Massey. Massey offered him tons of different venues, tons of forums, including a statewide Kentucky educational state television. And Massey would go to these events and sit next to an empty chair. Wow. So he said, when voters asked him why he wouldn't debate Gall, Ryan said, I'm debating him every day. I'm talking right to the American people, just like the president does, with no middleman. So no debate, no transparency, just millions in donations. Don't explain yourself. Don't tell us where you came from. Just take the money and win. This thing stinks to high heaven. I'm not a tinfoil hat election person. I don't do the election fraud. This stinks. And let me tell you a little bit more about why. Massey's last challenger got Ed Gallrein got 375% more votes than Massey's last challenger. Ed beat Massey 54% to 45% in the most expensive House primary in history at $32.6 million in ads. They bought a 9-point win. Massey raised $5 million, mostly grassroots, with his median donation was $250. Gallrein's median donation was $1,000, and most of his maximum individual donors previously donated Democrats. That tells me they're probably Jews. Not in this anti-Semitic way. I mean, because those are the people that shift from Democrat to Republican to align with their interests. The regular Americans aren't swapping from Democrat to Republican to vote for Ed Gallrein. So if that's the
strange vote.
Right. So that's what we have there. Also, guys, go check out the numbers. Again, I'm not a tinfoil hat person. Ed Gallrein had like 10,800 mail-in votes. He won by 10,200 votes. This is not a big district, guys. There's the thing. And that's what I said before. When I found out about the money they were dumping into it, I said, this is an investment. They're not going to lose. They put over $40 million into it, just them alone. Massey knew he wasn't going to win. American people need to wake up. And like we were talking earlier with Matt Kennard, to go full circle about January 6th. Does Massey get a January 6th? No, because he's not paying people, suing the IRS, creating slush funds, using them as streamers, using them as influencers, using them as paid provocateurs. I'm calling you out, Jake Lang. They're all over the place. You guys think most of your popular streamers are prior January 6ers. A lot of your MAGA streamers are Jan 6ers. Go look it up. You don't get a January 6th. Because he's not backed by AIPAC and all of this J money. Americans really need to wake up. MTG told you we're not going to vote ourselves out of this. Let's check out what else Massey said, because this is important.
And there was the president talking about, by the way, while gas is almost $5 and diesel's almost $6, they're talking about this big ballroom they're going to build, and it looks like the Roman Empire, architecture from the Roman Empire. I see a few analogies there, and people are just trying to make ends meet. But we were promised that Miriam Adelson would pay for that ballroom, but she spent so much money in this race, they're going to have to reduce the footprint of that thing.
I know he's joking, but they just shifted the bill to us.
Did they really?
Miriam dumped her money in your primary, and so we got to pay the bill for the ballroom.
What can you say? What can you say? Really?
And lastly, here's your message of hope from Thomas Massey.
What happens in 2028? You want? You want me to run for Congress again? I don't know what you're talking about. All right, well, you made a compelling argument. You spoke your piece, but I need a medical margarita right now. And we'll talk about it later. Thank you and God.
I don't know, man. Not that I don't like Massey, but I don't even care about elections anymore. I really don't.
Elections, schmelections. Where's that medical margarita?
Medical margarita. Medical Xanax, more like it. My God. And if you looked at the other guys, his victory speech was to about 100 people. So I don't know who these voters are. I'm not trusting this election at all. But at the same time, okay, I can't say it on YouTube. If elections don't matter and if we can't compete with their money, what are our options?
There are a lot of options out there in the world, and you can just look at history to decide.
You can't compete with their money. And like somebody else said, I missed the comment, but somebody said, it's funny, 30 million is just chump change to these people. Do you know how much work it takes to raise that kind of money grassroots? Go look at the Bernie campaigns.
Yeah.
How much work they took and how that was all for naught. You can't, I don't want to be black pill at the end of the episode, but you're not gonna be able to compete with their money. You don't have it. We don't have it. And with the transfers of wealth that happened with COVID and the transfers of wealth that are happening now with AI, transfers of wealth that happen with the gig economy, we don't have that money anymore. The middle class is gone. Working class lives paycheck to paycheck. Most of them don't have savings accounts. We don't have the money to compete with these people. We don't control the voting machines. You tell me what you think the options are. Again, I can't say it. We're on YouTube.
I heard about this woman with a big wig who said, let them eat cake. And then a lot of stuff happened in that country.
She got a bad rap. She got a bad rap.
There was a Bastille. There was this. There was a lot of this object with the falling thing. I don't know. A lot of that.
And I do see a lot of people are fed up. I went to some Spaces Anonymous last night. I'm still on my Twitter hiatus, but I wanted to hear what people were saying, especially on the MAGA side, because we know what the left would say. Or I can pretty much predict. And they were really upset. And they were upset for the right reason, which it was refreshing to see that they were upset because of the control of the election, not necessarily because Massey lost the seat. And like we were saying in our previous episodes, how I was complaining maybe a little bit too much about people fighting and dividing themselves over primary elections, like the one in Florida, which is dividing the right, which neither of us are on anyway, but it is dividing the right. I don't know that Dan Bilzerian can win.
Mm-hmm.
Not because of lack of political will on his part or lack of political will of the people. I'm looking at this scenario right here with Thomas Massey, who's an approachable candidate for most of the people in his district. He's from there. They know him. He acts like them. He talks like them. And they still rigged his election. In my heart, that's what I believe. They still rigged his election to make sure he lost. They probably just use it as a money laundering device anyway. Who the hell knows what happened to all that money?
You know what happened to that money. This is Kentucky. This is Kentucky after all.
Oh, fentanyl.
Who knows? But listen, at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is this. This is but one election. Let's see what happens. We're getting into election season now. We have midterm elections. We have Dan Bilzerian who's running. We've got a lot of very interesting races coming up. But one thing is clear. The Massey vote shows the split in the MAGA movement. Let's not forget. It shows a split. It wasn't, 10 to 90. It was damn near. It was a 9% divide. And if you count margin of error and all this stuff, let's just say 50-50 plus minus. 50-50 plus minus. I think that we're in for seismic political changes. And that's why you're seeing this level of attack happening, because they know the writing is on the wall. The young people are critical of U.S. foreign policy, especially as related to the state of Israel. A lot of people in the MAGA movement are concerned. There's a lot of people angry about U.S. foreign policy, foreign military bases, interventions, coups, wars. I just think that we're in for seismic changes, and the result will be that there will be a big pushback from the elite to try to stem the tide, but the tide's coming nonetheless. Whether it brings down the whole temple on its head, that remains to be seen.
Pun intended on the temple?
Oh, well, no pun intended.
I just saw an enraging tweet from Palantir. It says, Palantir embraces the neurodivergent. Join us. Yeah, that's the fucking problem, Palantir. You've got all these autists running around with lethal weapons and AI. Like, yeah. I think we need to chill out on the hiring ads on, especially on Twitter, Palantir. Let's chill out on the classified ads on Twitter. Okay, we don't need to be giving the people on Twitter more weapons.
I agree, 100%.
Anyway, we've gone for almost 2 hours.
This has been a long stream. Thanks to all 4,300 people that are here. Mashallah. Yes.
We'll go through the super chats. Guys, make sure you share this. Matt put out so much good information in the beginning. And thank you for the huge super chat. Oh, sorry. Almost 3 hours. Oh, my God. I've been here with you for 3 hours. Thank you, Mo, for the huge super chat.
You could go another 3 hours, right?
No. My back is killing me. Almost done with the shock doctrine. The shock doctrine, as shit-libby as it is, changed my life. The reason why I am here in front of you today, for better or worse, is because of the shock doctrine. So if you hate me, thank Naomi Klein.
Yeah. There you go.
I love this comment. It's never too late to convert from Dirty Yankee to Comrade Yankov.
There you go.
Thank you for the super chat. I did ask your question. Hopefully, you know what? I'm actually going to look into this myself for my own, and this as well that you brought up. You always bring up so many good points, Starline. Thank you so much. This one about this Afghanistan producing meth and heroin, and then them using it to kind of fuel crazy people across. This is you got to read Starlion's his comments. He gives me so many great tips. So thank you so much for joining us, Starline, and giving me all of these wonderful ideas. Fuck the U.S. Army for how they treated our Iranian Greek bro, Chris. There has to be way more sense of honor in the IRGC or in the Russian Army. There is, because they care about their countries.
For sure. Their civilizations.
U.S. is treating minorities the way the U.S.-backed HTS Jolani regime is treating the Jews. Well, not really. It depends on what minorities you're talking about. You're talking about American minorities, because they're not killing us yet. HTS
well, they have
is
over
killing
time. I mean, they did teach. I mean, who taught about lynching and things like that? You know,
that's true. Oh yeah, thank you for the tip, Teshub. That's the reason why I grabbed that. So thanks so much for that, guys. We have a good chat. Piers Morgan is a piece of shit. I've declined appearances on his show multiple times. Hopefully, Chris won't be as mean as me and won't decline. But
I wouldn't decline.
I know you go on.
But I would, you know what I would do?
I would go on now. I wouldn't have gone on then. But I feel more confident now. He would have made me cry back then. I will ask Professor Morandi. We will have him on soon.
For sure.
Great friend of the show. And thank you for Amanda. And thank you for reading the shock doctrine. Everybody should read the shock doctrine. And after you're done reading the shock doctrine, go and pick up Matt's new book, Irregular Army.
Make sure you check it out.
And share it with your family and anybody that has served in the armed forces or anybody that is curious about our military. But I think I'm good. My back is killing me. My dog is like, can I have attention? And Chris looks like he's ready to go night.
Work continues, you know. The revolution
Work continued. Chris like, I'll nap for 2 hours. But we will see you guys on Sunday. I'm hoping to get at least one of our prior CIA spooks, maybe a Larry Johnson or a Ray McGovern, to talk about the creation of a military installation at the White House, because that's what the ballroom actually is. The White House is now a military base. Other than that, we have an ad from one of our lovely sponsors with our lovely Chris reading it. And other than that, we will see you all on Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your week. And try to get through it.
We're going to get through it. Don't worry.
We're gonna
Greetings, everyone. A few weeks ago, I covered Saga Metals trading as SAGMF in the US and Saga in Canada, a company I've featured many times on the channel. We're revisiting the story much sooner than expected. And why? A lot has happened in a very short period of time. Major developments are unfolding, and it looks like they've had another home run. Let's break it down together. What they've done in less than 6 months has changed the scale of the company. And less than 48 hours ago, they achieved 100% drill success rate in all 57 drill holes ahead of schedule. And that's just the beginning. The company added $10 million to its bank account from a successful financing round dedicated entirely to drilling, adding serious fuel to an already accelerating program. When you step back and look at what Saga has achieved, in less than 6 months, the pace is hard to ignore. 100% hit rate across all drilling at the Radar project, an area being positioned as a potential host to one of the largest titanium systems ever identified in North America. 2, a strategic titanium acquisition scooped from under $100 billion mining giant Rio Tinto, located in the same district as the largest titanium mine in the world. 3, and just last month, the acquisition of the Wolverine project. That project sits along the same billion-dollar coast as the Voisey Bay's discovery, one of the most significant mineral discoveries in history. When you step back and look at the momentum building, the first half of 2026 is already been highly active, and the second half is looking set to be even more exciting. You might ask, how can all of this be achieved in such a short span of time? The reason is simple. America's defense supply chain depends on titanium. That's why Washington has already committed $12 billion through Project Vault, alongside additional federal support aimed at securing domestic and allied supply. In less than 12 months, the U.S. has taken a series of major steps to rebuild and secure critical mineral supply chains, including Executive Order 14241, the launch of Project Vault, and a State Department ministerial bringing together 55 foreign ministries focused directly on critical minerals. As the U.S. and its allies move to secure the future, Saga Metals is positioning itself directly where the money, the mandates, and the momentum are flowing. They're exploring the exact materials that sit at the foundation of advanced aerospace, next-generation technologies, and stealth technology in particular, the unseen backbone of modern defense and aerospace. And the reality is increasingly clear. North America needs what it does not currently have, and the direction of travel from Washington is becoming more defined. Onshore it, secure it, fund it, mine it. I'll leave you with this. One of the standout aspects of Saga Metals' achievements over the past 6 months is scooping another titanium project from under Rio Tinto, a company roughly 3,500 times larger by market value. This takes skill, patience, and execution. Look at the numbers, you do the math. If you want to learn more about this critical minerals story, check out the link in the description. A special thanks to Saga Metals for making today's video possible.